Part 31. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 301. Chapter 301 Respect. Gu Huayu nodded, so that's the case. No wonder his face changed color when he heard that he would be compensated with 6,500 taels of silver. King Qin said, his annual salary is only 6,500 taels of silver. He has to live frugally for decades to save it. Can he not feel distressed? Gu Huayu asked, where is his wife? Did she marry after becoming a jinchi, or before she became a jinchi? King Qin replied, I married after becoming a jinchi. I married the daughter of the then Fang Shaoqing of Taikang Temple. Gu Huayu played with King Qin's jade pendant. Shaoqing's daughter should have some dowry. King Qin said, in the capital, such a family is considered an ordinary family. Gu Huayu nodded, it's not easy for a poor scholar to reach the position of minister. King Qin nodded and said, Wang Deng has been in the Ministry of Rites for decades, and he has gradually reached the position of minister with his own ability. After the death of my grandfather, the post of Minister of Rites has been vacant in these years. In recent years, the affairs of the Ministry of Rites have been handled by Wang Xiang, but in fact most of the affairs were completed by Wang Shilang. Wang Shilang is a practical person. King Qin's words reminded Gu Huayu of Wang Shilang's deep bow under the candlelight. She injured his granddaughter, and Wang Shilang must have been very annoyed with her, but when he saw her, he did not argue with her, but apologized to her. This person is not only practical, but also patient. Seeing Gu Huayu's confusion, King Qin lowered his head and asked, what's wrong? Gu Huayu came back to her senses, shook her head and said, it's nothing. King Qin pinched Gu Huayu's chin and said, you didn't even hear what I said to you, and you still said it was nothing? What were you thinking about just now? Tell me honestly. Gu Huayu said truthfully, I'm thinking about Wang Shilang. After saying that, Gu Huayu told the king of Qin what happened after meeting Wang Shilang. After hearing this, King Qin said, the information I got back from my inquiry said that Wang Shilang was humble, polite, and upright. When he apologizes to you, it is not necessarily a forbearance, but a sincere apology. He is the head of the family. Wang Suimei did this because he was not strict in running the family. Gu Huayu felt that King Qin's analysis was reasonable, and she said that she had violated the Stockholm Syndrome card again. Qinjian, shouldn't I accept his money? King Qin smiled and asked, what? Are you feeling sad? Gu Huayu nodded honestly. King Qin joked, old man Wang is worthy of being the Minister of Rites. He handled this matter very well. Not only did he forgive Wang Suimei, but he also made you feel guilty for accepting his money. After hearing this, Gu Huayu laughed and said, me too, why are you blaming yourself? The money was originally mine, and I asked him to compensate according to the price, and I didn't ask him for a penny more. King Qin nodded, that's right to think so. Maybe Wang Shilang will be grateful to you for this. Thank me? What are you grateful for? Injuring his granddaughter? Asking you to pay 6,500 taels of silver. King Qin nodded, the injury is just a pain in the flesh, it will heal, and the money can be earned again after spending it. Compared with Wang Suimei's life, which one is more serious? Wang Shilang can't understand these truths. Gu Huayu nodded, if that's true, this old man will be respected. Let's wait for the result. If my guess is correct, the old lady of the Wang family will definitely come to your door to apologize to you in the near future. Really, Gu Huayu became interested and looked up at King Qin. How about we start a game, within 3 days, to see if someone from the Wang family will come to apologize. If they do, you win. If not, you will win. How about I win? Seeing her high interest, King Qin nodded with a smile and said, okay, what about the lottery? What should I use to make the lottery? Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, if I lose, how about cooking a meal for you with my own hands? King Qin raised his eyebrows and said, then I want to have a big meal, so you can't treat me with hot and sour noodles. Guaranteed feast. What if you lose? What's your winnings? Gu Huayu replied. King Qin thought for a while and said, how about I make a painting for you? Okay, it's a deal. King Qin smiled and rubbed Gu Huayu's head. By the way, when you were handling things in the yamen, 3 groups of people came to the yamen to inquire about information. Gu Huayu wanted to sit up when she saw King Qin talking about business. King Qin hugged her tightly and asked, what's wrong? I sit up. King Qin shook his head and said, no, this is good. I like it. When Gu Huayu heard King Qin say that he liked it, she lay obediently in his arms and said, okay, that's it, let's continue. Qinjian, you just said that there were 3 groups of people seeking information. Have you asked anyone to check it? Which 3? King Qin nodded. After checking, the first person to leave was Baekangman Back Street. Baekangman Back Street, Huarujun. King Qin said seriously, are you sure that the person in the back street of Baekangman is Huarujun? Gu Huayu nodded. After half a day of leisure and the entanglement with Gyun Pavilion last time, Su Er recognized Yang Jian, the young boy who used to be by Su Xing's side. Yang Jian is now the deputy envoy of Lunjing Guard. King Yu followed Yang Jian and found the back street of Baekangman. He followed the clues and found out that Yang Jian was following Huarujun's orders. I remember telling you about this. King Qin was not impressed and asked, have you told me? Gu Huayu shook her head, I don't remember either. Could it be that Huarujun did what happened today? To take revenge on me? King Qin said, I don't know yet, so you don't have to worry. If it is really his move, there should be someone behind him. We should always pay attention to it. Gu Huayu nodded, yes, where are the other 2 groups of people? Whose people are they? King Qin said, one group is from Prince Ji's palace, and the other group is from Princess Jing'an's palace. Gu Huayu pressed her tongue against the back alveolar and said thoughtfully, it's not a small thing, it's a bit interesting. The king of Qi asked people to stare at me, but I can figure it out. Why are the people at Princess Jing'an's mansion staring at me? I don't know her. King Qin avoided Gu Huayu's gaze with a guilty conscience and said, I don't know what they want to do now. We should remain unchanged in response to changes. As long as they have a purpose, they will take action. Let's just sit back and wait for their action. Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, everything has a cause and effect, why is the Princess Jing'an mansion looking at me? The Princess of Jing'an is Wang Suimei's aunt. Is it because of Wang Suimei that she is eyeing me? That must be it. Gu Huayu talked to herself to convince herself, looked at King Qin and asked, Qinjian, is this Haoyang Zi, the Princess of Jing'an, and I have formed a knot? King Qin thought about Su Ziwen's difficult temperament and said, is it possible? Are you afraid? Gu Huayu pouted and said, it's not like I'm a loser. What do I have to be afraid of? Growing up, I've never been afraid of anyone. I don't cause trouble, but I'm not afraid of it either. King Qin rubbed Gu Huayu's head and said, I know, my little guy is the best. Are you hungry? Let's go eat. After King Qin mentioned it, Gu Huayu felt really hungry. He nodded and said, okay, where should we go to eat? King Qin looked out the window and said, this is close to Chang'an restaurant. How about we go to Chang'an restaurant to eat and then go back? Gu Huayu nodded in agreement, okay, I want to eat the braised lamb chops made by Lu Dangtu. King Qin squeezed Gu Huayu's hand lovingly, okay, let them cook it for you. King Yu, go to Chang'an restaurant. King Yu responded, okay, I understand. Wang's mansion, Wang Shilang returned to the house and asked, where is the old lady? The servant replied, go back to the old lady. The old lady is at the young lady's Qiwen at the moment. Wang Shilang walked towards Qiwen. Arrived at the gate of Qiwen, Wang Shilang saw that the yard was full of people, and said solemnly, "What are you doing standing here?" They have all dispersed. Hearing Wang Shilang's voice, the servants hurriedly paid tribute and left the small courtyard. Wang Denke and Mrs. Fang, the couple treated each other with respect and treated each other like guests, and they had spent decades together. Mrs. Fang gave birth to 3 sons for Wang Denke, the eldest son Wang Zhouquan, the second son Wang Zhouyuan, and the third son Wang Zhuoi. The second son and third son all went to work abroad, and only the eldest son Wang Zhouquan served in Beijing. The Wang family is prosperous, with 3 brothers, Wang Zhouquan, each having 3 sons. Wang Suimei is the only girl in the family. She is a treasure in the family's hands when she is born, and she is loved by the whole family. It is no exaggeration to say that Wang Suimei is the apple of the Wang family's eye. Mrs. Fang, who was in the house, heard from her servants that Wang Shilang was back and came out with her whole family. Wang Shilang saw that Mrs. Fang's eyes were red and swollen, and knew that her wife was crying about her granddaughter. Mrs. Fang likes daughters and has always dreamed of having a daughter. However, her wish did not come true and she gave birth to 3 sons in a row. Difficulty in childbirth during the birth of her third child hurt her body, and she never became pregnant again, which ended her dream of giving birth to a daughter. Mrs. Fang couldn't give birth herself, so she pinned her hopes on her son. I look forward to a granddaughter from my eldest daughter-in-law like I look forward to the stars and the moon. I usually hold her in my hands for fear of falling, and hold her in my mouth for fear of melting. Today, 1 leg was broken and 3 ribs were broken. This is not to kill Mrs. Fang. Mrs. Fang's tears that she had managed to hold back fell again when she saw Mr. Wang. "Master, you are finally back." Wang Shilang felt sad when he saw his wife crying. He advised, "I'm back, please stop crying. Your eyes will hurt if you cry for a long time." Mrs. Fang raised her hand to wipe her tears and said sadly, "Sister May is hurt so badly, I feel sad just looking at her. I wish I could feel the pain for her." Wang Shilang picked up the handkerchief and wiped his wife's tears. I know everything." After Wang Shilang finished speaking, he looked around and said, "Zhouquan and Huiyun stay, while the others go back and rest." Wang Suimei's brothers left one by one, leaving only Wang Zhouquan and his wife in the room. Wang Shilang turned around and entered the inner room, walked to Wang Suimei's bedside, and saw Wang Suimei sleeping with her eyes closed, with tears still on her face. "Father, Sister May just went to bed," Wang Zhouquan whispered. Wang Shilang nodded and said to the maid, "Serve your master well." The maid bent her knees to respond. Wang Shilang exited the inner room, entered the Nuan pavilion, walked to the soft couch and sat down, and said to Wang Zhouquan and Su, "You two should sit down too." Wang Zhouquan and Su sat down as instructed. Mrs. Fang looked at Minister Wang and asked, "Sir, Princess Yan Ran injured Sister May, why do you still pay her money?" Wang Shilang took a sip of tea and sighed, "What happened today was our Sister May's fault first. Mei Jie had people beat the princess's second sister until she couldn't get off the ground, so the princess had people beat Mei Jie. I asked people to inquire and found out that Miss Guer also had a broken leg and 2 broken ribs. Madam, let's compare our hearts. We feel sorry for Sister May, and the princess also feels sorry for her second sister." Mrs. Su raised her head and looked at Wang Shilang and said, "According to father's wishes, let's forget about this matter. Will Sister May be bullied in vain?" Mrs. Fang couldn't see her daughter-in-law questioning her husband, so she cleared her throat twice. Mrs. Su looked at the old Mrs. Fang. Although she was dissatisfied, she lowered her head and said nothing. Wang Shilang turned to look at the old lady in the room. "Has Madame asked Madame Gao about the cause of the incident?" Mrs. Fang shook her head and replied truthfully, "I learned that Sister May was injured, and I am in a mess both physically and mentally. How can I be in the mood to ask anything else? Wang Shilang sighed and said to the entourage at the door, bring Gao Po in. Having been married for decades, Ms. Fang understood her husband's emotions very well. She sensed anger from Wang Shilang's expression. Ms. Fang looked at Shilang Wang in surprise. Sir, Aunt Gao is Sister May's nanny. She also raised our Sister May. She should not harm our Sister May. Wang Shilang said, Madam, don't worry, let's listen to what Aunt Gao has to say first. Ms. Fang wanted to say something else, but Grandma Gao lowered her head and came in, consciously kneeling in the middle of the room. This slave has seen the old master, the old lady, the master, the madam. Wang Shilang said expressionlessly, tell us the ups and downs of today's events one by one. If there are any lies or concealments, we will beat them to death with sticks. After Wang Shilang's words came out, not only Ms. Gao trembled with fright, but also other people present were stunned and looked at Wang Shilang. Ms. Fang's face became solemn. She had been with Shilang Wang all her life, and she had never seen him speak to anyone with a straight face, let alone punish him. Ms. Gao looked at Ms. Su anxiously. Ms. Fang said in a deep voice, didn't you hear what the old man said? Ms. Gao hurriedly leaned over and said, go back to me, old lady. I heard this, so I'll tell you now. Today's events should start from 3 months ago. 3 months ago, the in-laws of Yong'an Marquis Mansion celebrated her birthday. When the young lady was playing with Princess Xiwen and several cousins, she overheard the gossip of the maids around the princess. The maid said that she went back to Huayu Pavilion on Daowen Street several times to buy fragrant dew, and she always met the eldest son of Privy Wang's house. They also said that Mr. Huang and Miss Gu Er from Huayuj were flirting with each other. After hearing this, the lady was so angry that her eyes were red. The princess told the young lady that crying was the most useless, and the best way to relieve her anger was to go to Miss Gu Er's house and beat her up so that Miss Gu Er would not dare to stay in the capital and put an end to Mr. Wang's thoughts. Ms. Su was so angry that she scolded, nonsense, when did you know about this? Misses are young and ignorant, and you are also ignorant. Why don't you stop it? Or come and report it to me. Ms. Gao glanced at Ms. Su and said in a low voice, I can't persuade the lady, and the lady doesn't allow the servant to tell the lady. Wang Shilang said, go on. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 302. Chapter 302, Teasing. Ms. Gao looked at Ms. Su and continued, the young lady thought the princess's idea was a good one, so she asked the servant to pick a few strong women to accompany her to Daowen Street. It was unlucky to go back. Miss Gu Er returned to Shishan, so we went to make a fuss. At first, the slave thought that this matter was over. Yesterday, Miss Er, Miss Cousin, and Princess Xiwen were shopping together. I don't know who heard that Miss Gu Er had returned to the capital. After the lady came back, she asked her slaves to choose some tall and strong wives. The servants searched around the house and only picked out 5. When I went to Daowen Street today, the maid next to the princess sent 6 more women over, saying that they were lent to the young lady. Just like that, the slaves followed the young lady to Daowen Street and beat the second young lady Gu. The old man knew what happened next. Ms. Fang's hands were shaking with anger, and she raised her voice and said, come here, take Ms. Gao down, beat her with 10 big boards, and then send her to Zhuangzi. Ms. Gao knew that she was in trouble and did not dare to plead for mercy. She leaned over and said, I know I was wrong. Thank you for not killing me. The servants took Gao Poza down. Ms. Fang raised her hand and wiped the corners of her eyes. Master, what happened today has ruined Sister May's reputation. What should our Sister May do? It's all my fault. I always think that Sister May is still young, and I will tell her how to deal with things when she is older. It was my concubine who spoiled Sister May and made her neglect her discipline. Thinking that her daughter's reputation was ruined, Mrs. Su silently wiped away tears. Wang Shilang couldn't see his wife crying and comforted him, "Madam, don't be sad, this is just a step in Sister May's long life. Fortunately, when Sister May encounters ups and downs, we are by her side and can accompany her to overcome this hurdle. We have the opportunity to tell her what is right and wrong, and we can also teach her step by step how to treat others and how to behave. When a reputation is ruined, it is ruined. If a person falls, he can still stand up. If a reputation is ruined, he can build it up again." Mrs. Fang said with a worried face, "But Sister May is not young anymore. Something like this happened today. Sister May's marriage, the Huang family." Wang Zhouquan said, "Auntie, my son agrees with his father's statement. If the reputation is ruined, it will be ruined. Nothing is as important as Sister May. As long as Sister May is good, nothing else matters. If the Huang family cannot tolerate the slightest shortcomings of Sister May will also suffer the consequences if she marries her. It is better not to marry than to marry and suffer. At worst, we will raise Sister May for the rest of her life." Mrs. Fang thought for a while and said, "Okay, both Master and Zhouquan said so. Then do as you say. Huiyun, what do you think?" Huiyun is Mrs. Su's name. Mrs. Su said, "A daughter-in-law listens to her father and mother." Seeing that her daughter-in-law had no objection, Mrs. Fang turned to Wang Shilang and said, "Since what happened today is Sister May's fault, tomorrow I will take Huiyun to Wutong Lane to make amends to Princess Yan Ran." Wang Shilang nodded, "Go ahead and choose some good gifts. Madam will take the family to apologize. When Sister May gets better and can go to work, she will take Sister May to the door to apologize in person." Mrs. Fang understood what Wang Shilang was thinking, nodded and said, "Okay, I have written it down." Mrs. Ting Fang was going to Wutong Lane to apologize to Hua Yan Ran. Mrs. Su was unhappy and drank tea to hide her emotions. Mrs. Fang glanced at Mrs. Su, turned her eyes to her son, winked at her son, and then said, "I have to go to court tomorrow, let's go back first." Wang Zhouquan and Mrs. Su quickly stood up and saw each other off. After Wang Shilang and Mrs. Fang left, Mrs. Su complained, "I don't understand. Princess Yan Ran clearly beat Sister May seriously, why do we have to come to apologize? My father is still in the 4th rank after all. Are you so careless about face?" After hearing what Mrs. Su said, Wang Zhouquan knew that she had not thought clearly, so he sighed and said, "Is our face more important, or is Sister May's reputation more important?" "Of course Sister May's reputation is important." Wang Zhouquan said, "Knowing that Sister May's reputation is important, you should listen to your father and mother." "But," Wang Zhouquan said patiently, "No, but you need to remember that father and mother care about Sister May very much, and they will not harm Sister May." So she nodded in agreement, "Okay, I will listen to the master." Wang Zhouquan felt better when he saw that Su was obedient. Then he explained patiently, "I know you feel sorry for Sister May. I am Sister May's father, and I feel sorry for her too. Today's events make us understand that we cannot just coddle Sister May, we must let her understand what is allowed and what is not allowed. People can't do whatever they want, and they have to have boundaries and bottom lines as a human being. When my second and third brothers and I were young, our father was very strict with us. He was also very strict with brothers Xueqing, Xueheng, and Xuefeng. You see, brother Qing and the others are so sensible. Tonight, my father said that he should teach Sister May well. That is Sister May's blessing. From now on, you should focus more on the affairs of the house and leave the education of Sister May to your father and mother." "Master, Sister May, she..." So she met Wang Zhouquan's gaze and swallowed back the words that followed. Wang Zhouquan held Mrs. Su's hand and said, I know you are reluctant to let go. As soon as today's incident comes out, the Huang family will definitely come to the door tomorrow to cancel the engagement. Sister May's marriage is ruined. Do you hope that she will never get married? So she shook her head in panic. I don't hope. Master, will the Huang family really come to the house to cancel the engagement? Wang Zhouquan nodded, 9 times out of 10, yes. Since Madame doesn't want Sister May to be unable to get married, she will leave Sister May to her father and mother to teach her. Mrs. nodded in agreement, I will obey the master. However, Huang Mansion is such a good family, so this marriage is a pity. Wang Zhouquan didn't take it seriously and said, Huang Xingyi flirted with women before he got married. What's the good thing about it? If you quit, just quit. There's nothing wrong with it. But stop it, go and have a rest. I'll take a day off tomorrow, and I'll guard Sister May tonight, Wang Zhouquan said. Mrs. Fang and Chilang Wang returned to Kainyuan. Mrs. Fang ordered people to serve rice. Wang Shilang waved his hand and said, there is no need to prepare rice. Let the kitchen bring me a bowl of noodles and cook it until soft. Mrs. Fang nodded and asked the stewardess to make arrangements. Wang Shilang said to Mrs. Fang, my wife will ask someone to clean up the east wing tomorrow and bring Sister May to Kainyuan. Mrs. Fang said, okay, I will tell you to go down in a moment. We will pack it up in the evening and pick up Sister May in the morning. Wang Shilang continued, from now on, I will push as many posts as I can about the Princess Jing'an mansion. Mrs. Fang nodded and said, I have written it down. However, Princess Xiwen and Sister May have always been cousins. Wouldn't it be bad if we obstructed them too obviously? Wang Shilang thought for a while and said, our Sister May has grown up with love and affection. She has a simple mind, but she is not stupid. In my opinion, what happens today is just a cause. After a while, the results that others want will come out. Through this matter, Sister May should be able to see many people and things clearly. While she is recovering from her injuries, let's talk some sense into her and she will know how to do it. Hope so. At Chang'an restaurant, Gu Huayu finished the last piece of mutton chop, licked her hands with satisfaction, and said, it's so delicious when you're full of wine and food. King Qin picked up the warm handkerchief and said, pass over your little paw. Gu Huayu followed the words, stretched out her hand, looked at King Qin with shining eyes and said, King Jian, if I become a big fat man, will you dislike me? King Qin wiped Gu Huayu's hands and said, no. It's a lie, even though I know it's a lie, I still like it after hearing it. King Qin raised his head and looked at Gu Huayu, to prove that I am not lying, starting from tomorrow, I will eat 3 meals a day with you and urge you to eat well. Gu Huayu said hurriedly, no, I don't want to gain weight. I'm fine as I am now. I'm very satisfied. King Qin looked Gu Huayu up and down and said, are you satisfied? I feel a little thinner. Stand up and take a look. Gu Huayu stood up and walked towards the door. She smiled and turned around and said, how is it? King Qin narrowed his eyes slightly and asked, Xiao, where are you going? Gu Huayu replied, I'll go to Gong's room, and then we should go back. King Qin asked, do you know how to get there? Wait, I will go with you. No, I know how to go. You wait for me here, I'll come back as soon as I go. Gu Huayu opened the door and went out. Gu Huayu left the room and walked along the corridor. The restaurant's guest room was at the end of the corridor. The corridor is quite long, and there are private rooms along the way. The laughter in the private rooms can be heard through the walls. On the long corridor, the busy figure of the waiter shuttled between the rooms. Gu Huayu came out of the royal room and met a man from the private room who was walking out. It seemed that he had finished eating and was ready to leave. Gu Huayu stopped, wanting to wait until the group of people dispersed before passing. A bloated man looked back and saw Gu Huayu. Hey, Where did this beautiful girl come from? This figure, tisk tisk tisk, is amazing. Chang'an restaurant also uses beauties to treat guests. Why didn't I know? She's so cute, little lady, I like it. The man was wearing an indigo gown, and his fat flesh made the gown bulge. His staggering steps made the flesh on his body tremble. At first glance, he looked like a fat-headed guy. Gu Huayu watched the man walking towards her with cold eyes. The man stared at Gu Huayu's and said, "Little lady, let's go and have a drink with my brother." Others watched the bloated man approach Gu Huayu and shouted, "Old Huang, just now you said you couldn't do it, but you can do it when you see the little lady." Lao Huang turned back and glared at the boors. "Lu Jingui, shut up. When will I die? I am a sword that never grows old, and my power never fails. Old Huang, I'm not bragging, you can act for me today to open your eyes. I'm afraid that you won't be able to control yourself when you see the beautiful lady, and you'll just melt down." The crowd laughed loudly, and the dirty words became louder and louder. Old Huang became even more excited after hearing what his accomplice said. He turned to look at Gu Huayu with a lustful look, and said proudly, "My dear lady, if you obey me today, I will give you a place in the most prosperous area of the capital. How about a 5-bedroom house?" "Wow, it's a 5-level house, Lao Huang, what a big deal," someone shouted. "Little lady, this is the 5th house. Please accept it quickly." Lao Huang looked at Gu Huayu proudly and asked, "How is it?" Gu Huayu shook her head and said, "Not very good." Someone asked, "My dear lady, that's a 5-level house, and it's the most prosperous area in the capital. Do you know the price? You can't afford wine even if you stay here all your life." Gu Huayu nodded, "I'm not moved." Seeing Gu Huayu's refusal, Lao Huang added more chips. "In addition to a house worth 5 yuan, how about adding 1,000 taels of gold?" Tisk, tisk, tisk. "Lao Huang, you are really willing to spend money. Little lady, a house with 5 jins and 1,000 taels of gold will be enough for you to eat and drink for several lifetimes, so just nod." Lao Huang looked at Gu Huayu, "Are you satisfied now?" "Xiao, what's going on?" The king of Qin received the report and hurried over. "Rugjuan is leading the way, give way, give way. The onlookers make way." Gu Huayu saw King Qin and said to him, "Qinjian, just watch from the side and don't talk. I have to handle today's affairs by myself." King Qin saw the murderous look in Gu Huayu's eyes. This was the first time he saw her angry. King Qin nodded and said, "Okay." The king of Qin has been traveling abroad in recent years. He only returned to Beijing during the Dragon Boat Festival this year. After returning to Beijing, he lived in seclusion. Many people in the capital told his stories, but they had never seen him in person. No one in this group has ever seen King Qin, so naturally they don't know who he is. Lao Huang glanced at King Qin and thought he was just a pretty boy, and did not take him seriously. He turned around and asked, "Little beauty, how about a house with 5 rooms and 1,000 taels of gold?" Gu Huayu gave him a disgusted look, "Not so good. I own the house, and I also have the gold. If you have anything else, tell me and see if I can be attracted." The onlookers came from King Qin to the queen. They were not as arrogant as before, but they did not leave. They gathered around to watch the fun with the intention of watching a good show. "Lao Huang, what do you want me to ask you? What can you add?" Lao Huang thought for a while and said, 5 more shops and 1 village, no more." Gu Huayu shook her head and said, "I have all these, I don't need them." Lao Huang realized that something was going on at the stall today, and he retreated in his heart. Due to the large number of people watching, he couldn't lose his temper for a moment, and asked stubbornly, "What do you want?" Gu Huayu moved a step to the left, walked to the front of old Huang, raised her leg and kicked towards old Huang's private parts. Lao Huang watched Gu Huayu start to move his feet. He wanted to get out of the way, but his head knew it, but his feet didn't obey him. Lao Huang looked at Gu Huayu in shock. In an instant, Gu Huayu's foot had kicked Lao Wang's lower body hard. Then, he heard Lao Huang scream and roll on the ground holding his lower body with both hands. The men watching, all with pale faces, clamped their legs and stepped back, fearing that Gu Huayu would kick them next. Lao Wang's entourage saw it and wanted to step forward to help, but Rugjuan grabbed him and pushed him to the ground. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 303. Chapter 303 Injustice. Gu Huayu waited for Lao Huang to stop rolling, holding her lower body in cold sweat and panting. Then Gu Huayu said, "My Huayan Ran is very expensive, you can't afford it. People like you who have a little money are very annoying. Disgusting. Don't you know?" Gu Huayu became angrier as she spoke. Gold is a good thing, and a house is also a good thing. When these good things come into the hands of non-things like you, they become vulgar and disgusting. I despise you the most. In order to prevent you from harming other girls, I will never let you get up. The last sentence, Gu Huayu leaned down and said it very softly, so softly that only the person named Huang could hear it clearly. After speaking, Gu Huayu straightened up and said to King Qin, "Qinjian, let's go." Old Huang covered his lower body with his hands, stared at Gu Hua and said, "Smelly bitch, you are shameless when I give you face, just wait for me." Gu Huayu raised her chin and said, "I am Gu Huayu, the princess of Yan Ran whom the emperor bestowed upon me. I live in Wutong Lane. If you are able, come to seek revenge. My aunt is waiting." The onlookers looked at Gu Huayu in astonishment. At first, they heckled those who lowered their heads with guilty conscience. Gu Huayu took 2 steps, turned around and said, "I'm going to kick you today to teach you a lesson. If I see you teasing a decent woman again, I don't care where you come from, I will make you unable to stand up from now on. If you don't believe me, try it." King Qin looked at old Huang on the ground and said to Rugjuan beside him, "Go and ask shopkeeper Miao to come over." Rugjuan nodded in agreement, "I understand, little one." As soon as King Qin and Gu Huayu entered the elegant room, Rugjuan opened the door and came in and said, "Master, Princess, shopkeeper Miao is here." Shopkeeper Miao leaned forward and said, "Master, I'm sorry, I just went to the kitchen and I didn't know something happened here." King Qin nodded and asked, "Where is this man from?" Shopkeeper Miao leaned forward and said, "My lord, the man who offended the princess is called Huang Jinhao. He is the cousin of the imperial concubine. He used to do water transportation business on the Shanghe River. When King Qi was the consul of the Ministry of Industry, he started to switch to the stone and timber business. At present, he is the largest timber merchant and stone merchant in the capital, and his family ranks first in terms of construction materials in the capital. He usually gets close to Prince Qi's mansion." Gu Huayu put down the teacup in her hand and snorted coldly, "I asked why he is so arrogant. It turns out he is a relative of the emperor." The king of Qin said to Rugjuan, "Let me check Huang Jinhao's business to see if he is the victim of bullying." Rugjuan knew in his heart that Huang had offended his master, so he immediately responded, "Yes, I understand." Gu Huayu was disgusted by the person named Huang and didn't want to stay outside for a long time, so she said, "It's getting late, let's go back." King Qin nodded, "Let's go." The two of them went to the backyard to get in the car, and it was King Yu who drove the car. Gu Huayu was in a low mood and leaned against the carriage without saying a word. After driving for a while, King Qin said, "Xiao, let's get married first, okay? I promise you that I will avenge Uncle Hua and the others." Gu Huayu turned to look at King Qin and asked, "Okay, why are you talking about this again? Are you stimulated by what happened just now? In this world, people are popular, and benevolent people are welcome. So, there is no need to take it personally." King Qin shook his head and said, "I understand these principles. I just want to encounter something like this again in the future, and I have the identity to stand by your side and protect you behind me. Unlike today, I don't have the identity to speak for you, I can only watch from the sidelines, feeling so useless. Furthermore, I would like to give you the identity of Princess Jean, so as not to offend you in a short-sighted way." Looking at the angry King Qin, Gu Huayu's depressed mood gradually calmed down. How lucky was she? There was someone who thought about her at all times and couldn't bear to see her suffer any injustice. Gu Huayu smiled and leaned towards King Qin, comforting him, "Are you still angry about what happened today? It's such a big deal, please stop being angry, okay?" King Qin raised his hand and held Gu Huayu in his arms, and said persistently, "Xiao, tomorrow I will ask my father to grant us a marriage, okay?" Gu Huayu knew that what happened today had irritated King Qin. Gu Huayu met King Qin's gaze and said, "King Jian, give me some more time, okay?" King Qin looked at Gu Huayu intently, trying to capture her true thoughts from her expression. Even though the two of them were very close, Gu Huayu still gave him a floating feeling. This feeling made him very uneasy, and he was afraid that one day Gu Huayu would quietly leave him again. Like 3 years ago, he could not find any trace of her in Daxing. King Qin stared at Gu Huayu for a long time before asking, "How long?" Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, "Maybe after the new year." "How about it? It's already the end of October, and the new year will be in 2 months. King Qin felt happy and looked at Gu Huayu intently. "Xiao, you have to mean what you say. You can't say more after a few years at most." "Okay." Gu Huayu nodded, "It's a deal. After the new year, you will go and ask for a marriage." King Qin was in a good mood after receiving Gu Huayu's promise. He lowered his head and kissed Gu Huayu. "Little guy, I will ask my father to grant us a marriage on the 30th night, and I will announce the decree on the first day of the new year, okay?" Gu Huayu smiled and said, "No, if this is the case, the officials of the Ministry of Rites will probably scold you. I won't run away, I will always be by your side. Let's be normal and let everyone have a good new year." King Qin was so pleased by "I'm not running away" that he nodded and said, "Okay, I'll listen to you." King Qin lowered his head and kissed Gu Huayu, and murmured, "I really want to rub you into my bones. From now on, I can take you with me wherever I go." Gu Huayu raised her hand and poked King Qin's chest, "I have always been in your heart, and you are also in my heart. We have never been apart for a moment." King Qin hugged Gu Huayu and said softly, "Little guy, I like you so much that I feel sore in my heart. I am so afraid of losing you. When I think of losing you, my heart will panic and hurt. What should I do?" Gu Huayu kissed King Qin's lips and said after a long time, "Me too." King Qin buried his head in Gu Huayu's neck and said after a while, "Go out and bring pear blossoms and begonias with you." Gu Huayu nodded, "Okay. I'll listen to you." The king of Qin rubbed Gu Huayu's head and said, "Be good." As the car reached Wutong Lane, Gu Huayu said, "Qinjian, you don't have to get out of the car. Let King Yu take you directly back to the palace." King Qin nodded, kissed Gu Huayu on the forehead, and said, "Remember to miss me." Gu Huayu nodded obediently, "I will." Gu Huayu jumped out of the car and watched King Yu drive away. She didn't turn around and enter the yard until she couldn't see the shadow of the car. MRS Ping and MRS Wang came out of Gu Jinjuan's house and met Gu Huayu, who came to take care of Chen Wan. "Yan Ran is back, have you eaten yet?" MRS Wang asked with concern. Gu Huayu greeted the two of them and replied, "Thank you, aunt." After eating, has the second sister rested? I'm still awake now, so hurry in and take a look. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, it's getting late. Grandma and aunt will go back and rest first. Mrs. Ping said, don't worry about us, you go see Cheng Wan first. Gu Huayu nodded, said goodbye to Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang, turned around and entered Gu Chenjuan's room. Gu Chengwan heard Gu Huayu's voice and kept waiting with her eyes open. Seeing Gu Huayu come in, Xiao. Gu Huayu walked to the bed and asked, how do you feel? It hurts. Gu Chengwan nodded, it hurts a lot. Gu Huayu consoled her, it will hurt a little bit in the first few nights. It's very sad. You need to endure it for a few days. Gu Chengwan nodded, I know, I can bear it. You have a good rest, don't think too much, I will take care of everything. Gu Chengwan nodded in agreement, I know you are tired today. Go back and rest early. Gu Huayu came out of Gu Chenjuan's house and saw Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang still standing on the corridor, so she hurried over. Grandma, aunt, it's cold at night, why are you still standing outside? Mrs. Ping said, wear thick clothes and it won't be cold. Gu Huayu took Mrs. Ping's hand and walked forward. Mrs. Ping turned her head and looked at Gu Huayu and asked, Yan Ran, is the person who attacked Chao Chengwan really the granddaughter of Wang Shilang? Gu Huayu nodded, yes, Minister Wang came to the Yamen to see me and apologized to us on behalf of his granddaughter. Mrs. Ping sighed and said, alas, a good man like Shilang Wang also has troubles at home. Gu Huayu stopped, looked at Mrs. Ping and asked, Grandma, do you know Mr. Wang? Mrs. Wang took over and said, back then, things in our family were very troubled. In addition to people from the clan coming forward, people from the Ministry of Rights also came. The person from the Ministry of Rights was Wang Shilang. Wang Shilang said a lot of justice for us. It was because of alerting the people in the Ministry of Rights that Mr. Shen did not dare to make things difficult for us anymore. Speaking of which, Minister Wang is our benefactor. Gu Huayu nodded slightly, I understand, don't worry, Grandma, the kindness must be remembered. If we have the opportunity in the future, we will return this kindness. Mrs. Ping nodded happily, okay, just remember Yan Ran, we can't be ungrateful people. It's getting late, you should go and have a rest earlier. There's no hurry, I'll send my grandmother and aunt back. Mrs. Wang said, that's good, I just have something to discuss with you. Gu Huayu turned to look at Mrs. Wang and asked, Auntie, what's the matter? Mrs. Wang said, your birthday is on the first day of October. You were on your way back to Beijing at that time. I couldn't celebrate your birthday this year. If you miss your birthday, you will miss it. But you are 15th this year, so we have to give you a birthday gift. I want to discuss it with you to see when the wedding ceremony is best. Gu Huayu leaned forward and said, thank you, Grandma, thank you, Aunt. Mrs. Wang said, you child, what do you have to thank for this? You worry about the inside and outside of this family, and the whole family depends on you to support us. We do small things, nothing worthy of your thanks. Gu Huayu smiled and said, as my aunt says, we are a family and we don't say thank you. Mrs. Wang smiled and asked, that's how it should be. Take a look, Yan Ran, what about the first day of winter? If you think it's feasible, I'll start planning. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, let's fix it on the first day of the winter lunar month. Auntie, you can make arrangements. If you need anything, ask Aunt Wang. Mrs. Wang nodded in agreement, okay, I know. Gu Huayu took Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang back to the house, drank another cup of tea together, and then stood up to say goodbye. Gu Huayu returned to her room and felt very sleepy. After a brief wash, she fell asleep. The next morning, Gu Huayu woke up and looked at her watch. It was already 9 o'clock. After getting up and washing up, she went to say hello to Mrs. Ping. Gu Huaidong's sudden death made Gu Huayu realize that filial piety cannot wait. After returning to Beijing, Gu Huayu took Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang back to the city. He greeted them morning and evening every day and tried his best to spend time with them. Mrs. Ping saw her coming and asked, "Has Xiao had breakfast?" Gu Huayu shook her head and replied, "No, I want to come over and have breakfast with my grandmother and aunt." Mrs. Wang hurriedly asked the servants to add bowls and chopsticks. 3 generations of grandparents had breakfast together. Gu Huayu got up and went to Gu Chenjuan's house to check on Gu Chengwan. Gu Chengwan looked at Gu Huayu aggrievedly, "Xiao, do you believe me? I really didn't seduce anyone named Huang." After listening to Gu Chenjuan's words, Gu Huayu put down the thermometer in her hand, kicked the brocade stool beside the bed with her feet, moved the brocade stool closer to Gu Chengwan, sat down and said, "I believe it. Tell me about your surname Huang. How did I find you?" Gu Chengwan thought for a while and said, "I don't quite remember when Huang came to the shop. Since our store opened, business has been very good, with many customers coming in every day. How can I remember who is who? As long as the guests come to our door, we will treat them warmly. Yesterday when Ms. Wang was talking about her husband, I didn't even know who she was talking about. Xiao, I am really wronged." Gu Huayu asked, "You can't even remember who Huang Xingyi is now?" Gu Chengwan raised 3 fingers of her right hand and said, "Xiao, I swear, I really don't know who Huang Xingyi is. There are many repeat customers coming to our shop, and I really didn't pay attention to who was who. In addition to helping the customers in the shop, I am also responsible for preparing perfume. You want me to learn how to put makeup on people and read books? I am so busy that I don't even have time to remember who is who." Gu Huayu knew that Gu Chengwan was telling the truth. "I understand, just relax and take good care of yourself. Princess, Madame Fang from Shilang Wang's residence sent a message to come over and apologize to the Princess Liandong came in and reported." Gu Huayu was stunned. The matter was settled yesterday. Why did he come to the government again today? Gu Huayu said to Gu Chengwan, "You can rest in peace and recuperate, I'll go take a look." Gu Huayu came out of Gu Chenjuan's room and asked, "Have you reported it to your grandmother?" "I've already reported it," Lonisara replied. Gu Huayu said, "Then let's go directly to the gate." Gu Huayu walked to the gate and saw that her grandmother and aunt had already arrived. When Mrs. Ping saw Gu Huayu coming out, she said, "Xiao, what is the surname of the old lady in the Wang family?" Gu Huayu said, "The surname is Fang. Mrs. Fang is the daughter of Fang Shaoqing of Taikang Temple during the reign of the late emperor. The eldest lady of the Wang mansion is surnamed Su, and she is the daughter of Marquis Yong'an." "Princess, old lady, Wang's carriage is here," the servant said. Gu Huayu looked over and saw a carriage with the Wang mansion logo approaching. Mrs. Ping took Gu Huayu's hand and moved it to the side to make it easier for the Wang family's car to park. After Mrs. Fang's mother-in-law and her daughter-in-law got out of the car, Mrs. Ping pulled Gu Huayu up to greet them. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 304. Chapter 304 Old Acquaintance. Mrs. Fang knew that Mrs. Su was feeling awkward, and was afraid that she would look scornful. At this moment, seeing Gu Huayu and others approaching, Mrs. Fang hurriedly pulled Mrs. Su forward to pay homage to Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu looked at Mrs. Fang, who was all smiles, and Mrs. Su, who was being pulled like a puppet by Mrs. Fang, and returned the favor with a smile. Mrs. Fang exchanged a few words with Gu Huayu, then turned her attention to Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang, and asked, "Princess, who are these two?" Gu Huayu introduced with a smile, "This is my grandmother, Mrs. Ping, and this is my aunt, Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Fang and Mrs. Su are blessed to meet each other again." Mrs. Ping stared at Mrs. Fang. When Mrs. Fang straightened up, she asked, Qing Feng. Mrs. Fang was stunned for a moment, looked at Mrs. Ping carefully, and asked with a slight frown, who are you? After Mrs. Ping confirmed that Mrs. Fang was her old acquaintance, she said excitedly, I am Yuan Feng of the Ping family in Yuquan Lane. Do you still remember? Mrs. Fang looked at Mrs. Ping intently, raised her right hand in the air, shook her index finger a few times, surprise showed in her eyes, yes, you are Yuan Feng and Anazai. Where have you been over the years? I went back to Yuquan Lane to find you and said that your family had moved. Mrs. Ping replied, the year after Uncle Yuan's family moved away, my family also moved away from Yuquan Lane and moved to Katajiying in the east of the city. Mrs. Fang said, no wonder. Gu Huayu looked at Mrs. Fang and then at her grandmother. When the two stopped, she asked, are we old acquaintances? Mrs. Ping took Mrs. Fang's hand and happily said to Gu Huayu, my family and King Feng's grandmother's family are door-to-door neighbors. When she was a child, she came to her grandmother's house to play, and we often got together to play. Her name is Qing Feng, and my name is Yuan Feng. Both of our names contain the character wind. When we were young, our family called us little madmen. Mrs. Wang smiled and said, it's really a fate. I haven't seen my mother-in-law and the old lady for decades, right? Mrs. Ping said, I haven't seen him for more than 50 years. If it weren't for the mole on King Feng's eyebrows, I wouldn't dare to recognize him. Mrs. Fang raised her head and touched the mole in the center of her right eyebrow, and said with a smile, it's good that it's marked, so you won't be afraid of getting lost. Gu Huayu said, Grandma, let's stop standing outside and go inside to chat slowly. Mrs. Fang, please come to Mrs. Su's house. Okay, let's go into the house and chat slowly. Please come to King Feng's room, and please come to Mrs. Su's room. Seeing that her mother-in-law and Mrs. Ping were old acquaintances, Mrs. Su's expression softened a lot. She smiled and replied, old madam, Junior Su Huayun, you can always call me Huayun. Good boy, then I will call you Huayun. This is my daughter-in-law Xiaolan. Let's talk together. Mrs. Wang nodded slightly towards Mrs. Su and entered the house politely. Before coming, Mrs. Su was a little reluctant. Now that everyone is so polite and Mrs. Ping is an old acquaintance with her mother-in-law, she feels much better. Gu Huayu led her into the living room and sat next to Mrs. Ping. While listening to Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Fang reminiscing about old times, she served them tea and water. The two old men would cry and laugh sometimes as they talked, making everyone feel sad and happy with them. Mrs. Fang learned that Mrs. Ping's eye disease was cured by Gu Huayu. She looked at Gu Huayu in disbelief. The princess is still knowledgeable about medicine. Gu Huayu smiled and said modestly, I understand a little bit. After hearing this, Mrs. Fang was full of praise, and finally said, well, Yuan Feng, I have something to ask of you. Mrs. Ping asked, what's the matter? Qing Feng, tell me. Mrs. Fang looked at Mrs. Ping, then at Gu Huayu, and said sheepishly, my natal brother has been blind for several years. I wonder if the princess can help me see him. Mrs. Ping looked at Gu Huayu and asked, Yan Ran, can you help me take a look? Gu Huayu could see some earnestness on her grandmother's face, and responded with a smile, okay, I'll go take a look with Mrs. Fang later. Mrs. Fang immediately bowed and thanked her. Mrs. Fang and Mrs. Su sat together for more than an hour. Then she got up to visit Gu Chengwan and said goodbye after leaving Gu Chenjuan's house. Mrs. Ping left them to have lunch, but Mrs. Fang said they would wait for another day, as there was something else going on in the house today. Mrs. Ping did not stay much longer and agreed to visit another day. Gu Huayu took a box of elixirs and handed them to Mrs. Su. Madam, what happened yesterday was because I was too impulsive and seriously injured Swime. Bring this elixir that helps bone growth to Swime. Let her take one in the morning and one in the evening. Mrs. Su took the elixir and bowed to express her thanks. Mrs. Fang and Mrs. Su returned to the Wang mansion, and the porter reported, "Old madam, someone from the Huang mansion has come over." Mrs. Fang asked, "Who is coming from the Huang mansion?" The porter leaned forward and said, "Go back to the old lady. Here are Mrs. Zhang and the matchmaker from Huang mansion. Grandma is accompanying the guests in the living room at the moment. Mrs. Zhang is the mother of Huang Xingyi and the eldest daughter-in-law of Privy Huang. Grandma Xing is Mrs. Su's eldest daughter-in-law, from Wang Sueking's family. Mother, Mrs. Zhang really brought a matchmaker to the door today. What Mrs. Su was worried about happened, and she felt indescribably uncomfortable. Mrs. Fang didn't feel very happy. She took a deep breath and said, "Go in first and see what she says." Mrs. Su nodded, "Yes." Mrs. Su responded, thinking about how to explain to the Huang family and see if the marriage could be saved. Mrs. Fang thought about it, and her husband was right. As expected, the Huang family broke off the engagement. Fortunately, they did not marry Sister Mei. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law went to the living room silently with their own thoughts. When Mrs. Zhang saw Mrs. Fang and Mrs. Su entering the room, she quickly stood up to greet them. "Hello, old madam." "Hello, Madam Su." Mrs. Fang nodded with a smile. Mrs. Su greeted with a smile, "I didn't expect Shuhan to come to the door. I just went out with my mother, so I'm rude." Mrs. Zhang replied sheepishly, "Huiyun, don't say that. It's because I didn't do a good job. I came to the door before I handed in the post." Mr. At this moment, Mrs. Fang is not in the mood to eat. Then he said, "No, I'm not hungry now. Have Shuhan and the others eaten? Set food for them." After hearing this, Mrs. Zhang hurriedly said, "Old madam, I don't want to trouble you. We came here after dinner." Mrs. Fang smiled and said, "Okay, let's have tea." Mrs. Zhang nodded and said, "Thank you so much, madam." After saying that, Mrs. Zhang picked up the teacup on the table and sipped the tea. Mrs. Zhang lowered her head to drink tea, thinking about how to speak. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Shen, was extremely angry. She wanted to have a good marriage, but the old lady insisted that Wang Nazai had no brains and could not be her eldest grandson's daughter-in-law, and asked her to bring a matchmaker to her house to cancel the engagement. Mrs. Fang put down the teacup in her hand, looked at Mrs. Zhang and said, "Shuhan came here today. Is there something wrong?" After saying that, Mrs. Fang turned her attention to the matchmaker. Mrs. Zhang smiled awkwardly, her mouth seemed to be stuck, and she couldn't open her mouth no matter how hard she opened it. The matchmaker looked at Mrs. Zhang and saw that she couldn't speak. He smiled apologetically and said, "What, old lady, it's like this. Mrs. Zhang came to visit today because she wanted to talk to the old lady, Mrs. Su, about the eldest young master and Miss Suimei. Marriage." Mrs. Fang looked at Mrs. Zhang and said with a smile on her face, "Shuhan is very thoughtful about the marriage. The two children are not young anymore, so it's time to discuss their marriage. Let's try to arrange their marriage in the first half of next year. It's all done." Mrs. Zhang felt even more guilty after hearing what Mrs. Fang said. Her face turned red and she stammered, "What about that, Mrs. That's it? My Mrs. Zhang asked a master to combine the horoscopes of Sister Mei and Xingyi. Master said that Sister Mei's horoscope is different from our Xingyi horoscope. Therefore, I brought a matchmaker to your door today to come to cancel the engagement." Mrs. Zhang stammered her words and breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Mrs. Su looked at Mrs. Jianfang, then turned to Mrs. Zhang, wanting to ask her where she hired the master. Mrs. Fang said before Mrs. Su spoke, "Well, I quite value this kid Xingyi. Thinking about having such a good boy as our uncle, I feel happy that Sister May has such a reasonable mother-in-law like you. I didn't expect that these two children were almost destined to be destined, what a pity. The 8 characters cannot be in the same place, it is destined by heaven. No one is stronger than heaven, and we have nothing to say. Mrs. Zhang didn't expect Mrs. Fang to respond readily, and she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Mrs. Zhang is extremely satisfied with her marriage to the Wang family. Mrs. Zhang's father, Zhang Wei, served in the Imperial College and had great admiration for Wang Shilang. In Mrs. Zhang's view, although the Wang family is not an extremely wealthy family, it can be said to be a very ordinary family in a capital city where there are many nobles and nobles. But the children of the Wang family are all very successful. The 3 Wang Zhouquan brothers were all Jinchi. Among the children of the younger generation, Wang Suiking, the eldest child, Wang Suiheng, the second child, and Wang Suifeng, the third child, are also Jinchi. Wang Suimei is favored by her brothers in the house. If her son marries Wang Suimei, these brothers will be his son's help in the future. What a wonderful marriage, but the old lady shouted to break off the engagement when she heard some rumors. Mrs. Zhang originally thought that if the Wang family did not agree to cancel the engagement, she would talk to the old lady. This marriage may be salvageable. What Mrs. Zhang didn't expect was that Mrs. Fang actually agreed directly. While Mrs. Zhang was still stunned, Mrs. Fang continued, "Huiyun, go and get the gift list that their family gave you before. While Shuhan is here, you can sort out the things according to the gift list, and let Shuhan take it with you later. Go back and save us a trip." After Mrs. Fang finished speaking, Mrs. Su had no choice but to do so even if she didn't want to. He could only nod his head and said, "Okay, my wife will do it now." Mrs. Su went out, and Mrs. Fang invited Mrs. Zhang to have tea. She and Mrs. Zhang talked about their affairs as usual. Soon, Mrs. Su came back with the gift list. When Mrs. Fang saw Mrs. Su coming back, she said, "Huiyun, take Shuhan to kiss something. I'm a little tired, so I'll go back and rest first." "Shuhan, I won't send it to you. Although our families are not married, we have known each other for many years and can be considered family friends. I will come over to play more often when I have time in the future." Mrs. Zhang was busy saying thank you. Mrs. Fang returned to Kainyuan and first went to the east wing to see Wang Suimei. She saw the maid standing outside the door and asked, "What's wrong?" Maid Ellie bent her knees and replied, "Back to the old lady, the young lady has kicked out some of the slaves." Mrs. Fang asked, "Has Sister May eaten?" Li Shuang shook his head and said, "No, the young lady smashed the food and didn't allow the servants to clean it up." Mrs. Fang said, "I understand, you guys are waiting outside the door." The maid and her mother-in-law bowed their knees in response. Mrs. Fang pushed the door open, walked through the outer room, and went straight to the inner room. Su Suimei heard the noise and said with a swollen voice, "I told you to get away." Mrs. Fang stood at the door and saw the food on the floor in the house. She said, "Girl May, do you want the old lady to practice kung fu by spreading the rice on the floor?" Wang Suimei heard Mrs. Fang's voice and opened her eyes to look over. She wanted to sit up, but when she moved she pulled the injured area, she frowned in pain. Mrs. Fang saw her granddaughter grimacing in pain and said quickly, "Just lie down and don't move." After saying that, Mrs. Fang turned to the door and shouted, "Someone come and clean the house." Maids and women swarmed in. Mrs. Fang scolded her with a stern face, "You lazy people, your house is so messy that you can't put your feet down and you don't know how to clean it up. All you do is laze outside. It's outrageous. This month's monthly payment has been deducted." Wang Suimei hurriedly explained, "Grandma, don't blame them. It was Mayor who didn't let them clean up. Grandma shouldn't punish them." "Punishment, you should be punished if you do something wrong." Mrs. Fang walked over and sat on the brocade stool beside the bed, saying with a straight face. Wang Suimei stretched out her hand to hold Mrs. Fang's hand and said coquettishly, "Grandma, Mayor was wrong. I won't lose my temper next time. Grandma won't punish them, okay?" Mrs. Fang held Wang Suimei's hand and stretched out her other hand to help her smooth her hair. She said warmly, "They did something wrong and they deserve to be punished. But it was not their fault. It was Mayor who tipped the bowl. It was clearly Mayor's fault. If Grandma wants to punish her, she should punish Mayor." Mrs. Fang said, "I haven't finished my words yet. Sister May has done something wrong and will be punished. Sister May's monthly payment will be deducted. Will Sister May accept her grandmother's punishment?" Mrs. Fang's words were very gentle, and she looked at Wang Suimei with loving eyes. Wang Suimei looked at Mrs. Fang and was stunned for a moment. Did her grandmother punish her? In Wang Suimei's impression, her grandmother never punished her. Seeing that Wang Suimei did not respond, Mrs. Ping continued to ask gently, "Sister May, will you accept the punishment from your grandmother?" Meyer was wrong, Meyer will accept the punishment. After saying that, Wang Suimei shed tears. Obviously her grandmother didn't reprimand her, nor did she shout harshly at her. The eyes she looked at her were even gentler than ever before, but her tears couldn't help but roll out. Mrs. Fang took out a handkerchief and wiped Wang Suimei's tears. She said warmly, "Sister May, don't cry. We can change our mistakes, but they will be gone. We know we made a mistake, change it, and don't do it again in the future." Mrs. Fang then asked, "Sister May, can you tell Grandma why you don't eat? Is it because the food doesn't suit your taste? The maid didn't serve you well? Or is it because of something else?" Wang Suimei lowered her eyes and did not answer. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 305. Chapter 305 Teaching. Seeing that Wang Suimei was silent, Mrs. Fang squeezed her hand gently and asked, "Did that girl Li Shuang make you angry?" Wang Suimei shook her head and whispered, "No." Mrs. Fang stared at Wang Suimei's face and asked, "Is that because the Huang family came to cancel the engagement and let you know?" Wang Suimei bit her lip and remained silent. Mrs. Fang knew she had guessed correctly. She patted Wang Suimei's hand and said warmly, "So, Sister May, please stay calm when encountering problems in the future and never be impulsive again." Wang Suimei only felt wronged, and tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Mrs. Fang raised her hand to wipe Wang Suimei's tears and asked, "Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel wronged?" Wang Suimei nodded. Mrs. Fang asked, "Why are you sad? Do you like the eldest son of the Huang family? Can't you let him go?" Wang Suimei didn't expect Mrs. Fang to ask such a straightforward question. Her face instantly turned red and she looked at Mrs. Fang embarrassedly. "Grandma." Mrs. Fang said seriously, "There is nothing to be embarrassed about. Tell Grandma what you think." Wang Suimei felt a little frightened when she saw Mrs. Fang looking at her seriously. He whispered, "I just find it very annoying. He didn't learn well and went out to hook up with others. In the end, his family came to the door to cancel the engagement." Wang Suimei's voice became softer and softer, until it was only a humming sound behind her. Mrs. Fang looked at her granddaughter who looked angry but did not dare to speak out, and felt relieved. If you don't take things seriously, will never grow up. Let's see if you dare to be impulsive in the future." Wang Shui glanced at Mrs. Fang secretly and did not dare to say anything. In the morning Li Shuang told her that yesterday because of her impulsiveness, her family paid out 6,500 taels of silver. My grandmother and mother even went to the house to apologize. Mrs. Fang looked at Wang Suimei's guilty and fearful eyes and consoled her, "Sister May, I am your grandmother. Grandma hopes you will be well. Even if you do something wrong, Grandma will do her best to help you. Grandma will only tell you based on the experience of people who have been there, that this is not the right thing to do. There is a cliff in front of this road, and we cannot go on this road. So, you don't have to be afraid of Grandma. Wang Suimei cried out emotionally, Grandma. Mrs. Fang raised her hand and rubbed Wang Suimei's head, and asked, Sister Mei, among you 10 brothers and sisters, do you know why your grandmother likes you the most? Wang Suimei looked up at Mrs. Fang and said, because Mei is a girl. Mrs. Fang nodded, well, does Meyer know why Grandma likes girls? Wang Suimei thought for a while and shook her head, Meyer doesn't know anymore. Mrs. Fang said with a smile, I like girls because they are well-behaved, gentle, well-behaved, thoughtful, and considerate. Just like our sister Mei. Wang Suimei looked at Mrs. Fang in shame and asked, what happened yesterday was Meyer's fault. Meyer should not have made trouble without remembering the consequences. Meyer let you down, I'm sorry. Mrs. Fang nodded happily, it's okay. It's good if you know your mistakes and can correct them. When encountering problems in the future, firstly, you must be calm and secondly, be reasonable. What Meyer did wrong yesterday was not that she ignored the consequences, but that she was unreasonable. Wang Suimei looked at Mrs. Fang in surprise, is there anything wrong with me taking people to have fun? Mrs. Fang said, you have to be a person with a heart. There is nothing wrong with taking people to have fun. But you have to be reasonable. If you ignore it, in addition to being beaten, you will also have to compensate for the loss and ask your family members to apologize for your visit. Wang Suimei said guiltily, it's all Meyer's fault, it's an embarrassment to the family. Mrs. Fang shook her head, Meyer, don't think so. Grandma doesn't think you are ashamed. Grandma watched you grow up. Grandma knows how good you are. If you want to blame it, blame your grandmother for not teaching you how to behave and treat others earlier. When you were born, your grandmother was the first person to hold you. At that time, you were small, like a glutinous rice dumpling, soft. Grandma was so happy that she couldn't open her mouth from ear to ear. Not only was Grandma happy about your birth, your grandfather was also happy. Because in the year you were born, your grandfather was promoted to Minister of Rights, and everyone said that you were the little lucky star of our family. Time passes day by day, and you grow up day by day. But in the eyes of Grandma, you are still the soft, little child you were when you were born, so Grandma protects you everywhere. When you want something from your brother's hands, or you insist on playing with your brothers. Even if what you want is something your brothers like, they don't want to give it to you. They think you are too young and are in the way, so they are unwilling to play with you. I will intervene and let them give you things and let them play with you. In my heart, you are the youngest in the family. You are the younger sister, so your elder brother should let you go. I am a grandmother and an elder. When my grandmother speaks, they have to listen. Grandma forgot that one day you will grow up, and when you grow up, you will have to face more than just your family. Others will not let you go, and I cannot order others like I order Chinggir and the others. Wang Suimei's tears came down again and she said, Grandma, Meyer understands, Meyer will not be willful in the future. Mrs. Gu raised her hand to wipe Wang Suimei's tears and said, be good, don't cry. This is not your fault, it is Grandma's negligence, it is Grandma's fault, it is Grandma who is sorry for you. Wang Suimei cried even more sadly when she heard Mrs. Fang apologize to her. Mrs. Gu comforted her for a while before Wang Suimei stopped crying. Mrs. Fang stroked Wang Suimei's hand with her thumb and asked softly, Sister Mei, you know what I did wrong yesterday. Where did you go wrong today? Do you understand? Wang Suimei said, understand, the mistake is that you shouldn't take it out on the food and the maid because you are in a bad mood. After Wang Suimei finished speaking, she raised her head and glanced at Mrs. Fang. When she saw Mrs. Fang staring at her, she quickly lowered her head and remained silent. Wang Suimei felt guilty and did not dare to look at her grandmother. You should know that if any of your brothers dare to waste food or express anger towards others, they will be punished by the family law. Ms. Fang's thumb was still slowly stroking Wang Suimei's hand, and her voice was still very gentle. Sister Mei, my grandparents like you. In addition to you being the only girl in our family, there is another reason. You know what is it? Wang Suimei was stunned, looked up at Ms. Fang, shook her head and said, I don't know. Mr. Fang smiled and said, because you have your grandfather's wisdom and open-mindedness, and your grandmother's love and tolerance. Wang Suimei looked at Ms. Fang in disbelief. Grandma, I am wise. Did you remember it wrong? Grandma has a good memory, how could she remember it wrong? Last year, you took Shanlin shopping and met the woman who kidnapped someone near the Liuguang Tower. You can see through the mother-in-law's tricks and deal with her calmly. Not only do you get yourself out of danger, but you also save several ladies from the house. Last year you were only 13, and you dared to deal with the woman who kidnapped someone. You were both courageous and resourceful, so why were you not wise? Wang Suimei was a little embarrassed to be praised by Ms. Fang. Actually, it's nothing. That woman is just too stupid. Ms. Fang said with a smile, it's not that I'm stupid, it's that our sister Mei is smart. Wang Suimei's eyebrows were raised, but she said, no way. Ms. Fang continued, Sister Mei, you are the person held in the palms of grandparents, and you are the pride of grandparents and grandparents. From now on, no matter what happens, don't take your anger out on others. Do you understand? Wang Suimei lowered her eyes and replied, Mayor has written it down. Ms. Fang took out her hand, smoothed Wang Suimei's hair, and said, it's our fault for causing such a big fuss on Daowen Street this time. It's understandable that the Huang family came to break off the engagement. This marriage should be cancelled as soon as possible, so that you can recuperate. When we meet the right person in the future, we can discuss marriage again. Wang Suimei asked, Grandma, there's something wrong with Miss Gu Er and Huang Xingyi's flirtation. Ms. Fang asked, how do you know that Miss Gu Er and Huang Xingyi are flirting with each other? Have you seen it with your own eyes? Wang Suimei shook her head, is that true? Mayor also heard what others said. You are so confused when it comes to yourself, you have forgotten the principle of seeing with your eyes and hearing with your ears. How can you listen and believe? However, the princess and I have been friends since childhood. The princess and I are close cousins. She will never lie to me. Ms. Fang was not in a hurry to argue, and just said, the Huang family's marriage has been cancelled, let's let this matter go for now. Let Li Shuang and the others come in and wait for you to take medicine and eat. Grandma is tired, so go and rest first. Okay, Grandma, walk slowly. Ms. Fang left the room and told the maid waiting on the corridor, you go in and serve Sister Mei. Ms. Fang returned to the upper room and saw the pills on the table. She asked someone to send them to Wang Suimei and told her to take one in the morning and in the evening. Princess Qing'an Mansion, Princess Xiwen's courtyard Ziwan, Miss Suzilian from the Yong'an Marquis Mansion and Princess Xiwen were walking along the corridor, with the maid and wife following behind from a distance. Princess Xiwen turned her head and looked at Suzilian, I can only help you so much. You have to rely on yourself for the rest. Suzilian took Princess Xiwen's hand and said coquettishly, Princess, you are a good person and will do your best to the end. Send the Buddha to the west and then help me, okay? Princess Xiwen broke off Suzilian's hand and said, second sister, for your sake, I even plotted against Suimei. Suimei doesn't know how to hold grudges against me now that she knows about it. Suzilian said, heaven knows this, earth knows it, you know it and I know it. If you don't tell me, if I don't tell you, how could Suimei know? I promise that as long as I can marry into the Huang mansion, I promise not to talk about what happened back then. Also, if you only help me succeed, I will definitely help you and the king of Qin. How about it? Tell me how you want me to help you. Suzilian looked at Princess Xiwen and asked in a low voice, Princess, can you ask the eldest princess to help me? Princess Xiwen asked in surprise, you still want to involve your mother in this matter? Are you going too far? Xiwen glanced at the maid behind him, turned around and reminded nervously, Princess, please keep your voice down. Princess, you also know that although we have a marquis in our family, except for the title, he has nothing else, and the marquis mansion is just empty. How could a family like the Huang mansion be accomplished if there was no noble person to mediate between them? Princess Xiwen said angrily, aren't you and Mr. Huang in love? Just ask him to come to propose marriage. Xingyi naturally wants to come to propose marriage, but didn't the Huang family just go to Wang's house to cancel the engagement? If Sui is an outsider, we don't have to avoid suspicion, but is Sui an outsider? Don't I have to take care of Sui? Feelings. Princess Xiwen thought about it and asked, tell me, what do you want me to do? Suzilian took Princess Xiwen's hand and whispered. King Qin came out of the yamen of the Ministry of Justice. When Rugjuan saw him, he drove the car to the side, jumped out of the car and set up the footstool. After King Qin got on the car, he quickly put away the footstool and drove to the Duke Qinquo's mansion. Went. King Qin asked, what's going on now? Rugjuan replied, at the time of the dynasty, the prince brought his subordinates to the palace to meet the emperor, and asked people to send the Wang family and their children back to the British government. Wang is the second daughter of Wang Yushan, Wangji County of Qixian County. Her name is Wang Shuang. She followed the prince 9 years ago and gave birth to a pair of twins for the prince. The son is named Lu Zilan and the daughter is named Lu Zixi. Lord, Ruhan is here. As soon as Rugjuan said this, he raised his head and saw Ruhan coming on horseback, and turned to report to the king of Qin. Ruhan saw the king of Qin's chariot, rode his horse over, and said to the king of Qin in the car, Sir, the crown prince has just come out of the palace and returned to the British palace. The king of Qin asked, has the Duke of Qinquo received the letter? Rug replied, Hui master, Duke Qinquo got the letter last night. King Qin asked worriedly, where is my aunt? Has she returned to the British government? Hui yeah, my wife has not returned to the British Duke's residence, and is still in Qinggong's residence. The king of Qin breathed a sigh of relief and said, let's hurry up and get back to the Qinquo palace before the crown prince. After receiving the order, Rugjuan raised the whip in his hand, and the carriage moved much faster. The king of Qin returned to the Qinquo palace and went straight to Qingfang Hall without waiting for the concierge to report. The king of Qin met Nanny Feng at the gate of Qingfang Hall. Aunt Feng was very surprised to see the king of Qin, and she quickly bent her knees to salute, Your Majesty is here. King Qin asked, Mom, is my aunt here with my grandmother? Mother Feng nodded, my aunt has been crying at the old lady for a long time. Your Majesty, please go in and take a look. The aunt was crying. It seemed that she knew about the prince's concubine. King Qin nodded and passed Aunt Feng into Qingfang Hall. When King Qin walked to the door, Mrsgn looked up and saw him, stood up and came over to greet him, Your Majesty is here. The king of Qin nodded and stepped into the threshold. Mrsgn looked up at King Qin and wanted to stand up to greet him. King Qin walked over and held Mrsgn's shoulders, Grandma, there are only members of my family here, so there is no need to be polite. Mrsgn raised her hand and patted King Qin's hand, and said, Your Majesty is here, please persuade your aunt quickly. She started crying when she found out that my uncle had taken a concubine, and she has been crying for almost half an hour. Your aunt and I persuaded you to come. I tried to persuade her, but she just wouldn't listen. King Qin walked to Mrsya, reached out and took Mrsya into his arms, and said, If you feel sad, aunt, Just cry. Once you cry, you will feel better. After hearing what King Chin said, Mrsya changed from crying to bursting into tears. Mrsgn looked at King Chin and wanted to say something, but Mrsgn stopped her. The king of Chin hugged Mrsya and did not dissuade her, allowing Mrsya to cry loudly. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 306. Chapter 306, Stupid or Not. Mrsya vented her frustration and slowly stopped crying. King Chin took the handkerchief from Mrsgn's hand and bent down to wipe Mrsya's face. Mrsya was embarrassed to ask King Chin for help, so she took the handkerchief and wiped her face herself. With red and swollen eyes, he asked in a hoarse voice, "Does the prince already know?" King Chin nodded, "Yes, I understand." Mrsya's tears fell again. King Chin wiped Mrsya's tears with a handkerchief and said, "Aunt, this man only deserves you to cry for him once. Aunt has already cried just now. There is no need to shed tears for him in the future. It's not worth it." Mrsgn took over and said, "Sister Shan, crying this time is an end to all your hard work over the years. The prince is right, he only deserves your tears once. From now on, don't cry for him again, he is not worth it." With one heart to Minjaya, Nai Minjaya shown his side, Mrsya was bitter in her heart, and tears rushed up again. Mrsya looked up and wanted to force the tears in her eyes. Mrsgn watched her daughter burst into tears, and her heart felt as if she had been stabbed by a knife. "When you've cried enough, put away your tears. Do you want to go back with him and continue to be his crown prince's wife, or what? Make up your own mind. After so many years, you are no longer an ignorant girl, it's time to be sensible. As I said back then, you choose your own route and live your own life. No matter how much others feel sorry for you, they can't replace you." Mrsya wiped her tears and looked up at King Chin. "Zikan, I don't want to see him again, and I don't want to go back to the British government. I want to make peace with him, please help me, okay?" King Chin raised his hand to wipe away the tears on Mrsya's face, nodded and said, "Okay, don't worry, Aunt, I will handle these matters. Please take care of yourself." Mrsya said, "Thank you." Nanny Feng came in and said, Madam, my uncle has come over. He said he wanted to see the old lady. At this moment, the second uncle is leading my uncle to Qingfang Hall." After hearing this, Mrsya quickly stood up and walked out. Mrsgn grabbed her and said, "Sister Shan, take the back door." Mrsya reacted, turned around and went to the back door. The king of Qin told Yemingjin, "Sister Jin, send your aunt back." Yemingjin nodded in agreement, "Okay." Mrsya left, and Yemingkin led Lu Dinkin into the house. Lu Dinkin did not expect that King Qin was also there. When he saw King Qin, he was stunned for a moment, and then he raised his hands to greet King Qin first. The king of Qin returned the gift with his hands raised, "Hello, your majesty." LV Dinkin exchanged greetings with the king of Qin, and then turned to Mrsgn to greet her. Mrsgn nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, "My uncle, you have had a hard journey. Please sit down and serve tea." The maid brought tea, but no one in the room had finished speaking. The air seemed to be solid and the atmosphere became dull. Lu Dinkin noticed how alienated everyone was towards him, smiled awkwardly, and asked, "How is your mother-in-law lately?" Mrsgn said calmly, "Thank you for your concern, uncle. I have been doing well these past few years. I can eat and sleep well." Lu Dinkin said with a smile, "That's good. My mother-in-law is in good health and lives a long life. It is a blessing for us as juniors. Mrs. Jean said, I don't dare to think about living a long life. I just hope that I can be healthy and be able to take care of myself in my lifetime. I don't want to cause trouble to the younger generation. Lu Dinkin said, if my mother-in-law has accumulated good deeds throughout her life, the Bodhisattva will definitely bless your old man's life to be smooth and free from illness and disaster. Mrs. Jean said, thanks to my uncle's good advice, I hope so. Lu Dinkin looked around and said, where's Sister Shan? Why haven't you seen her? I'm here to take her back to the house today. Mrs. Jean said, I'm afraid my trip today will be in vain. Sister Shan doesn't want to see you. Please come back. L.V. Dinkin's heart sank. What he was worried about happened. Mother-in-law, why is this? Mrs. Jean said, my uncle is pretending to be stupid when he asks this question. Lu Dinkin blushed and said, sister-in-law, King Qin said truthfully, Your Majesty, just before you came in, my aunt sat on the chair you were sitting on and cried for more than an hour. After hearing Aunt Feng's complaint, my aunt left through the back door. My aunt said she didn't want to see you. Mrs. Jean said, Dinkin, when you wanted to marry Sister Shan, what did you say when you knelt in front of me and Sister Shan's father? That day, you swore that when you married Sister Shan, you would treat her well, not take concubines, not accept married women, and live up to Sister Shan throughout your life. The results of it? Lu Dinkin leaned forward and said, Mother-in-law, I'm sorry, I broke my promise. Mrs. Jean waved her hands and said, You don't need to apologize to me. I married Sister Shan to you, not because of your vow, but because I couldn't resist Sister Shan. Sister Shan insisted on marrying you, but I couldn't help it. Mothers always hope that their children will be well, and they always hope that their children will be satisfied. You are now a parent, and you will definitely understand how your parents feel. But can you understand the feeling of an old woman watching her daughter cry heartbrokenly, but being helpless? I don't blame you for breaking your promise. The young man's oath was forgotten when he turned his back. I feel sorry for my stupid daughter who is not kind to others. I only blame her bad eyesight and blame me for being soft-hearted and not sticking to my own point of view. When I am old, I am diligent and see off my guests. King Qin stood up and said, Let me see the prince off. Mrs. Jean said, Then I'd like to thank you, Your Majesty. King Qin leaned forward and said, Grandma's words are serious, and my grandson should do it. The King of Qin turned around and looked at Lu Dinkin, Your Majesty, please. Lu Dinkin stood up, bowed and said goodbye to Mrs. Jean, then bowed his hands to Mrs. Jean, and left the Nuan pavilion with King Qin one behind the other. Walking to the corridor, King Qin slowed down, waited for Lu Dinkin to come forward, and then walked forward side by side with him. L.V. Dinkin asked, Sister Shan, is she okay? King Qin looked sideways at Lu Dinkin and asked, Is the prince asking about now or these years? L.V. Dinkin's expression froze and he said, These years. King Qin said, The prince seems to have a clear mind. In fact, I don't need to say it, the prince also knows it in his heart. Right. Of course, since the prince asked, I still have to tell the prince what I know. The prince has just come back today and must be very busy. Let's sit somewhere another day. Lu Dinkin didn't want to wait any longer and said, There's no need to change the date, let's go sit in Zizuyuan, okay. King Qin looked deeply at Lu Dinkin, nodded and said, As long as the prince has time, I can do it. Please, prince. The two of them walked towards Zizuyuan, but no one said a word along the way. Rugjuan and Ruhi were sitting on the corridor of Zizuyuan chatting. When they saw King Qin and Lu Dinkin coming over, they hurriedly got up to greet them. The king of Qin ordered, Send some tea to the study. Rugjuan bowed and responded, Yes, I understand, little one. The king of Qin politely let Lu Dinkin into the study and said, "Your Majesty, sit here." Lu Dinkin thanked him and took his seat. He looked around and said, "This place is the same as it was a few years ago. It has not changed." Rugjuan brought tea in. The king of Qin took a cup of tea from the tray and placed it in front of Lu Dinkin, and then took his own cup. Then he ordered, "Stay at the door and don't let anyone come in and disturb you." Rugjuan bowed down and left the room with his hands down. King Qin looked up and looked around the room and said, "Yes, Zizuyuan was designed for me by my grandfather. For more than 10 years, Zizuyuan has maintained its original appearance. The incense burner on the desk was brought back to me by my grandfather when he was on a business trip to Jiangnan. The painting of plum blossoms next to the bookshelf was painted by my grandfather for me after I took the exam for the first time. The bamboo painting on the side was painted for me by my grandfather when I took the Chiu Wei examination and passed the Xiaoyuan examination. My grandfather made an appointment with me. When I attend the spring festival and enter Yujia, he will make a painting of orchids and chrysanthemums for me, and gather the 4 gentlemen together." At this point, King Qin sighed slightly. "Grandfather left before I was finished after all. The 4 gentlemen cannot afford it?" L.V. Dinkin sighed, "There will be many regrets in life." King Qin nodded, "Yes, because I am afraid of regrets, so I want to cherish it." Lu Dinkin nodded in agreement and said, "Over the years, you, the prince and sister Shan have been wronged by the British government." King Qin looked up at Lu Dinkin and asked, "Master, did you know that I am not your son?" Lu Dinkin shook his head, "No, I didn't find out until I returned to Beijing." The king of Qin asked, "My aunt adopted me without telling the prince, does the prince blame his aunt?" Lu Dinkin shook his head again, "I don't blame you. I should be grateful to the prince, because with his company, Sister Shan has hope in her life. It was you who accompanied her through those long and difficult days." The king of Qin stood up and bowed deeply to Lu Dinkin. Lu Dinkin quickly stood up and said, "My lord, what are you doing? You can't do it." King Qin straightened up and said, "Thank you, sir. From beginning to end, you are the only person in the British government who sincerely accepts me." Lu Dinkin sensitively captured the message in King Qin's words, "No, before the identity of the prince is revealed, you are the legitimate son of the British Duke. Who dares to be disrespectful to you?" King Qin gave a wry smile and said, "Master, you don't know who the British Duke is? Being your legitimate son is not an easy task. The reason why I am alive today is not because of the British government's support, but because of my great destiny." Lu Dinkin touched his nose in embarrassment and said, "The old lady is selfish and small-minded. You have been wronged over the years." King Qin said, "The bad thing was not done by the prince, and the prince does not need to apologize. However, I have to tell the prince about these things, so as to give him some warning, so that he can protect your children in the future." L.V. Dinkin looked at King Qin doubtfully. King Qin looked at Lu Dinkin and said, "Master, do you remember that one of my servants is named Ruhi?" Lu Dinkin nodded, "Remember, I'm not tall and I know some medical knowledge." The king of Qin said, "If Ji didn't know some medical science, his medical skills could be compared with that of Dr. Hu from the Imperial Hospital. He was trained by his grandfather who spent a lot of money. The reason why my grandfather asked people to study medicine is because I was poisoned when I was very young. I have been weak and sick since I was a child, not just because I was born prematurely, but because I was poisoned." Lu Dinkin looked at King Qin in shock. "Poison?" King Qin twitched his lips and said, "In the British Duke's palace, the prince is a thorn in the old lady's side. How can the prince's children be treated well? That doesn't mean poisoning a child." King Qin looked at Lu Dinkin and said, "What can't happen? In addition to being poisoned, I was pushed into the lake twice. Once, Yuan arrived in time to rescue me, and once, Du Bin passed by and rescued me." "Rescued? So much so that for a long time, I didn't dare to go where there was water. Even if Ryuan taught me how to swim in the water later, I would not dare to go near the water for fear of being pulled under the water. LV Dinkin asked, how long did this take? King Qin thought for a while and said, I was 6-7 years old, and in the blink of an eye, it has been 6 years. The most recent time was 6 years ago, when I was traveling and was chased by the old lady's people. If it had not been for the rescue of kind people, my life would have been lost. So, it is not easy to be the son of the prince. The king of Qin smiled mockingly. Lu Dinkin asked, does father know these things? King Qin said, I told the duke, he knows. Father knows. He just watches the old lady do whatever he wants lawlessly. King Qin asked, otherwise? What does the prince want the prince to do? The prince must know that the old lady is the mother of concubine Li and the grandmother of the wise king. If word of the old lady's behavior spreads, how will concubine stand? How do virtuous kings fight for the heir apparent? LV Dinkin felt a sense of powerlessness in his heart. The king of Qin picked up the teapot and refilled the tea for Lu Dinkin. These are some of the worst things that the old lady did against me. Small things like kneeling in the ancestral hall and copying family rules don't need to be elaborated on. Of course, I am a little less, because I am a man, and I spend a lot of time outside. Even when I go back to my house, I am in the outer courtyard. I rarely hang around in front of the old lady. Even if the old lady wants to punish me, she has to remember it. Take action. There are countless things the old lady said against my aunt. The old lady made me see the horror of the back house. I remember that one year, my aunt was tortured by the old lady. Within 2 months, my aunt became as thin as a paper figure. She couldn't sleep well at night and her hair fell out in large quantities. Grandma was frightened when she saw her aunt's appearance. After asking her carefully, she found out that the old lady was talking about her aunt. After my grandmother released her aunt back to the British government, she started to pretend to be sick and ask someone to pick her up to take care of her illness. It took my grandmother more than half a year to get my aunt back. Lu Dinkin said, why didn't Sister Shan tell me these things? King Qin replied, what's the use of telling you? Can you go and say hello on behalf of my aunt who wakes up in the morning and dusk? I can still serve tea and water to Mrs. Yang on behalf of my aunt. I stand from morning to night all day long, and my feet are swollen from standing. Lu Dinkin's hands tightened and relaxed, and he couldn't answer a word. King Qin continued, even though she was tortured in the British palace, my aunt never shed a tear or flinched. Does the prince know why? Lu Dinkin raised his head and looked at King Qin. King Qin did not wait for his answer, but spoke first, my aunt chose to marry the prince herself. My aunt has the prince in her heart. She feels that she is willing to suffer no matter how much hardship it takes for the sake of the prince. The aunt even felt that the more the old lady abused her, the more she felt how difficult it was for the prince to make a living under the old lady. Do you think my aunt is stupid? End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 307. Chapter 307, Harmony. After hearing what King Qin said, Lu Dinkin was so ashamed that he could not speak. The king of Qin looked at Lu Dinkin and continued, 2 days ago, I learned from my father that the crown prince had returned to the capital, so I asked Ryujin to greet the crown prince. Ruhin rushed over and saw the British duke going to greet the prince. Rumo didn't show up, turned around and came back. So, 2 days ago, I knew that the prince had a woman and a pair of children by his side. The prince is away from home all year round and has to have someone around to take care of his daily life. As a man, I can understand the prince. But as a son who was raised by my aunt, I didn't know how to tell her that the man she longed for had a woman by her side, and that this woman had given birth to a pair of children. The king of Qin became more and more excited as he talked, and his mood was a little out of control. Thinking of his aunt crying so heartbroken, he wanted to raise his fist and hit the man in front of him. Lu Dinkin was so guilty that he didn't dare to look into King Qin's eyes. He wanted to open his mouth to defend himself, but he couldn't say a word. The king of Qin glanced at Lu Dinkin and then said, "I thought it would take some time for the prince to arrive in the capital. I still want to tell my aunt about this today so that she can be prepared." Unexpectedly, when I went to the Yamen at noon today, Rugjuan said that the prince had already entered the palace to meet the emperor. I hurried back to Chinquo Palace, hoping to get there before the crown prince. But when I arrived, my aunt had been crying for most of an hour, her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her voice was hoarse. It was the first time in more than 20 years that I saw my aunt crying so distraught that her heart was broken. Lu Dinkin stood up loudly and said, "Where is Sister Shan? I'll go see her and beg her for forgiveness." "Forgive?" King Qin sneered in his heart. At this point, he thought that as long as he said soft words and begged for mercy, his aunt would forgive him. King Qin looked up at Lu Dinkin, shook his head and said, "Master, please sit down. Before you enter Qingfang Hall, my aunt asked me to tell you something." Lu Dinkin sat down again and asked nervously, "Sister Shan, what did she ask the prince to tell me?" King Qin stared at Lu Dinkin for a moment and said seriously, "My aunt said that she doesn't want to see you anymore and doesn't want to go back to the British government. She wants to make peace with you." The word harmony exploded in Lu Dinkin's mind like a firecracker. He looked at King Qin in disbelief and sat like a fool. He couldn't recover for a long time. After a long time, Lu Dinkin said, "Why? Why do you want to reconcile?" King Qin paused while holding the cup, looked up at Lu Dinkin, and asked, "Your Majesty, don't you know why?" Lu Dinkin said, "Wang is not my first concubine, and Zilanzixi is not my only concubine. Does Sister Shan want to reconcile with me just because of a concubine?" King Qin bent down and put down the cup in his hand, smiled sarcastically, and said slowly, "Your Majesty's questions only make me feel that my aunt is very pitiful, and I am not worthy of my aunt. Your Majesty, please come back." Lu Dinkin argued hurriedly, "Your Majesty, we have had a father-son relationship for more than 20 years. You should know that I treat Sister Shan sincerely." King Qin asked, "How many concubines did the prince take? Every time you took a concubine, did you ever consider your aunt's feelings? How dare you say that you are sincere to your aunt? Is the word sincerity the prince's word? Is there a misunderstanding?" Lu Dinkin straightened his back and said confidently, "Isn't it normal to have concubines? In a family like ours, whose man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines?" When Lu Dinkin said this, he thought that the men in Chinquo Palace did not have concubines, and his voice dropped a bit. He said, "Of course, the Duke Chinquo is an exception. Looking at the capital, how many families are there like Chinquo Gongfu?" The king of Qin also knew that the British Duke's palace was different from the Chinquo Duke's palace. The British government is the residence of military generals, and heirs are particularly important to the family of military commanders. I take concubines just to spread my business. No matter how many concubines I have, Sister Shan will always be my official wife. As long as I am around, no one of my concubines dares to go past Sister Shan." King Qin laughed at Lu Dinkin's logic and asked, "According to what my uncle said, does my aunt still want to thank you?" Lu Dinkin saw King Qin's ridicule and knew in his heart that King Qin was dissatisfied with him taking a concubine. He softened his tone and said, "That's not what I meant. What I meant was that I had taken concubines before. Sister Shan didn't say anything. I thought Sister Shan didn't care about this." King Qin didn't know what words to describe his mood at the moment. He wanted to hit someone. King Qin took a deep breath, calmed down the anger rising in his heart, and asked, "The concubine before the prince was not given to you by Mrs. Yang? You accepted it willingly, right?" Same, if the prince doesn't want to take a concubine, what can Mrs. Yang do to you? Can a cow be forced to have its head pressed if it doesn't drink water? Mrs. Yang can't force the prince to consummate the marriage, right? Only if the prince is willing, the prince will take concubines and give birth to a bunch of for his aunt. The king of Qin was angry. He was not only angry with Lu Dinkin, he was also angry with himself. Before today, he defended Lu Dinkin in his heart time and time again. Lu Dinkin had to take concubines out of necessity, not voluntarily. Therefore, he had been very polite to Lu Zijian and his concubines over the years. Lu Dinkin blushed at the king of Qin's remarks and defended himself. What? When I took concubines, it was because Sister Shan had not had children for a long time. I took concubines out of filial piety. It's a good thing that Lu Dinkin didn't mention the matter of childbearing. He mentioned the matter of childbearing, which aroused the anger that King Qin had finally suppressed. King Qin tapped the table with the knuckle of his index finger and said, "Since the crown prince has talked about fertility, let's talk about it. I would like to ask the prince, how can a person who has taken Jueza decoction give birth to a child?" Lu Dinkin looked at King Qin in astonishment and asked, "Zikin, who took Jueza decoction? Are you saying that Sister Shan took Jueza decoction?" King Qin met Lu Dinkin's gaze and said, "If you go back and ask Mrs. Yang about this, you don't have to ask me. Do you know how much your aunt has paid for you? If you still have some conscience, it would be nice for your aunt to remember you a little bit. Go back and write the letter of Heli. Tomorrow, follow me to the Yamen to settle the matter of Heli." Rugjuan, seeing off guests. Rugjuan came in response, bowed to Lu Dinkin and said, "Your Majesty, please." Lu Dinkin begged, "Your Majesty, please let me see Sister Shan, okay? There are some things I want to say to her face to face." King Qin shook his head and refused. "You have hurt her deeply. If you are still a man and have some conscience, you should readily agree to divorce instead of taking advantage of her soft heart to bully her." Lu Dinkin's thoughts were exposed by the king of Qin, and he said unwillingly, "Your Majesty, this is a matter between us husband and wife, and we should resolve it ourselves." King Qin said, "My aunt has entrusted me with this matter, and I have the authority to handle it on her behalf. Your Majesty, you are not married yet, and you don't understand the affairs between husband and wife. Just let me meet Sister Shan. I have something to say to her. Your Majesty, when it comes to marriage, how can we just reconcile and divorce? That's it? If I want to reconcile, I have to hear it from Sister Shan herself before I believe it." King Qin thought about it for a moment and said loudly to the door, "Rugjuan, go to my aunt's yard and tell her that the prince wants to see her." Rugjuan leaned forward and said, "Okay, I understand." King Qin turned to Lu Dinkin and said, "Wait, let's see what my aunt says. If my aunt wants to see you, I won't stop you. If my aunt doesn't want to see you, let me handle the matter on her behalf." L.V. Dinkin leaned on the back of the chair with his hands clasped together, closed his eyes and prayed, hoping that Yeshan could see him out of the couple's long-lasting love. As long as Yeshan is willing to see him, he is confident to persuade Yeshan, ask for her forgiveness, and let her take back her words of reconciliation. King Qin picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Looking at Lu Dinkin with his eyes closed tightly, a complicated emotion surged in his heart. The man in front of him has been his father for more than 20 years. Thinking about how well he has treated him, he still softens his heart. In the end, he couldn't bear to refuse him, so he asked Rugjuan to ask his aunt. King Qin suddenly realized that deep down in his heart, he seemed to want his aunt to be with Lu Dinkin. King Qin realized that this thought was scary, and quickly shook his head to distance himself from this scary thought. Rugjuan came back very quickly. After entering and greeting the two of them, he bowed and said, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince, Madam said that her fate with the Crown Prince has ended and there is no need to meet again." King Qin felt slightly relieved. He should believe his aunt. She was no longer a young girl who had no experience in the world. Lu Dinkin asked with suspicion on his face, "Did Madame really say that?" Rugjuan leaned forward and said, "Hui Shizi, it's absolutely true. What I said are the exact words of my wife." Lu Dinkin wanted to say something else, but Jin said at the door, "Your Majesty, Madame Yao is here to see you." LV Dinkin turned around and looked at the door. King Qin said, "Please come in." Mama Yao lifted the curtain and came in with a sandalwood box in her hand. Madame Yao first went to the King of Qin to greet Lu Dinkin, and then bowed to Lu Dinkin and said, "Your Majesty, my lady knows that your Majesty is in Zizuyuan, so I asked my servant to pass this to His Majesty." Speaking, Aunt Yao brought up the sandalwood box. Lu Dinkin looked at the box, his heart tightened, and he felt that he couldn't keep up with his breathing. He took the box with trembling hands and opened it casually. He saw that there was a jade hosta, a set of hairpins, a pair of jade bracelets, and a jade pendant. Lu Dinkin looked at the contents of the box in a daze. He remembered that this hairpin was the first gift he gave to Yeshan, and Yeshan wore it with her hairpin. The jade pendant was something he took with him before getting married. He gave it to Yeshan so that she could stay with her, just like he stayed with her. The first face was a gift he gave her on their first anniversary. The jade bracelet was given to her when he returned to Beijing to report on his work for the first time after going to the border. They have been married for more than 20 years, and he seems to have only given her these 4 things. She has been guarding these 4 things for more than 20 years. After a long while, Lu Dinkin raised his head to look at Aunt Yao and asked, "Sister Shan, don't you have anything to say to me?" Mother Yao took out a letter from her sleeve pocket and said, "Miss, I wrote down what I wanted to say on the paper." Lu Dinkin took the letter from Grandma Yao, opened the letter, and lowered his head to read it. King Qin stared at Lu Dinkin. First, his hand holding the letter began to tremble, and then his tears fell. King Qin turned away his face and said to Aunt Yao, "Mom, you go down first." Mama Yao bent her knees to say goodbye and left the study with lowered hands. The King of Qin sat drinking tea without disturbing Lu Dinkin. Lu Dinkin read the letter several times before putting it away. He sat still for a moment, stood up and walked out with the sandalwood box in his arms. After taking 2 steps, he turned to King Qin and said, "I will be at Jingzhou Mansion tomorrow morning. The yamen is waiting for the prince." King Qin nodded in agreement, "Okay, I will be there on time, and I will see the prince off." LV Dinkin waved his hand, "No, I'll go back alone." The King of Qin insisted on sending him off, so Lu Dinkin had no choice but to follow him. On the way, Lu Dinkin asked, "Are Sister Shan and her son still living in Jinqiu Duke's mansion?" The King of Qin replied, "As my aunt likes, the Prince of Qin's mansion also has a courtyard. It is up to my aunt to choose whether it is the Jinqiu Duke's mansion or the Prince of Qin's mansion. She can live wherever she wants." Lu Dinkin nodded, "Yes, both the prince and Ming Hao Mingqin will treat her well. I don't have to worry about this." The King of Qin did not answer the call. After that, no one spoke anymore. The King of Qin sent Lu Dinkin to the gate. The young man Qin Zhen brought the horse over. Lu Dinkin took the reins, climbed on the horse, and said goodbye to the King of Qin. Before leaving, Lu Dinkin warned, "Zikin, you must be filial to Sister Shan in the future." King Qin nodded, "Don't worry, Prince, I will do it." Lu Zikin raised his head and glanced at Jinqiu Duke's mansion, then rode away. King Qin stood there until Lu Dinkin disappeared around the corner, then turned and walked back to the mansion. After passing the screen wall, King Qin looked up and saw Yeshan standing on the corridor. His heart froze and he walked over quickly and said, "Auntie." Yeshan raised her hand to wipe the corners of her eyes and asked, "Is the prince gone?" King Qin nodded, "Yes, I just left." Yeshan laughed while crying, "Zikin, am I useless?" He has done that to me, and I still can't let him go. King Qin put his arm around Yeshan's shoulders and comforted her. It's not that my aunt is useless. The hand will hurt when a thorn is in the hand, and the pain will be even worse when the thorn is pulled out. The heart is the same. If someone breaks in, your heart will hurt if your sincerity is let down by him. When I pull this person out again, my heart will hurt even more. However, the hand that was pricked by the thorn will heal, and the heart that was wounded will also be healed. It's just that we have to give the wound time to recover slowly. Auntie, believe in yourself and everything will be fine. Yeshan looked up at King Qin and asked, Zikan, are you okay? King Qin nodded, believe me, it will happen. Let's go to Qingfang Hall, don't let grandma worry. Yeshan nodded, okay. They went to Qingfang Hall. Mrs. Qin saw them and asked, sent them away. King Qin nodded, yes, the prince has left. He promised to go to the Yamen at 10 o'clock tomorrow to make peace with him. Mrs. Qin said, he still has some conscience. Mrs. Jian looked at Yeshan and said, Sister Shan is finally freed from the British government. Let's celebrate tomorrow. Lu Dinkin rode his horse all the way. Qin Zhen followed closely behind him with his heart in his throat, for fear that the horse would kick the people who could not get out of the way. The horse ran all the way to the gate of the British Duke's mansion. Lu Dinkin stopped the horse, turned over and dismounted, threw the reins to the servant, and went straight to Wuliu Hall with the box in his arms. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 308. Chapter 308 Calculation. Qin Zhen threw the reins to his servants and ran a few steps to catch up with Lu Dinkin. At the gate of Wuliu Hall, Lu Dinkin said, wait at the gate of the courtyard and don't let anyone in. Qin Zhen immediately stopped, leaned over and said, yes, I understand. As soon as Lu Dinkin returned to the British government, when Yuan Pavilion and Rong'an Hall received the letter. When the concierge delivered the letter, Ying Zhengzheng explained to Du Bin that he was going to prepare the ancestral genealogy for Lu Zilan and Lu Zixi. After hearing the report from the porter, the British Duke frowned and asked, you said the prince came back alone? Didn't Mr. Ye come back with him? The porter leaned forward and said, my lord, the prince came back alone, with a small wooden box in his hand. After he came back, he went straight to Wuliu Hall. Wuliu Hall is Lu Dinkin's courtyard in the outer courtyard. The British Duke waved his hand and said, I understand, you can go down. The concierge retreated. The British Duke said to Du Bin, why don't you go to Wuliu Hall and see what's going on? Du Bin nodded in agreement, yes, I understand. After Du Bin left, the British father walked around in circles in the room. Lu Dinkin did not bring Ye back, which made him very uneasy. The British master had only made a few turns when Du Bin came back. The British Duke stopped, looked at Du Bin and asked, what's going on? Du Bin leaned forward and said, when the prince came back, he entered the Wuliu Hall and asked Qin Zhen to guard the entrance of the courtyard. No one was allowed in. The British Duke asked, did you ask Qin Zhen? What happened? Why didn't Ye come back? Du Bin replied, I asked, and Qin Zhen said that after the prince went to Qingqiu Palace, he went straight to the backyard to see Mrs. Qin. Qin Zhen could not follow into the backyard of Duke Qingqiu's mansion. Qin Zhen said that the prince sat in the backyard for a short time, then came out of the backyard and went to the purple bamboo garden in the outer courtyard with King Qin. He wanted to follow him to serve him, but he was sent away by Rugjuan who was beside King Qin. Therefore, Qin Zhen didn't know what happened. The British Duke turned to look at the hourglass on the chest of drawers and said, Dinkin came out of the palace, came back, had a face-to-face meeting, and then went to the Qingqiu Palace. According to Qin Zhen's statement, Dinkin hadn't eaten yet. Ask Wang and Zilan Zixi to bring some food to Dinkin. Du Ben understood and came over, bowed and said, "Okay, I'll do it now." After Du Ben turned around and left, the British father-in-law walked to the window and stood there, looking at the grey sky through the window. There were many things going wrong this year, and he had to go to the temple to burn incense another day. In Rong'an Hall, Mrs. Yang is sitting at the top, and Mrs. Li and Mrs. Li are sitting at the bottom. After hearing the servant's report, Mrs. Yang asked, "You said that traitor didn't bring Bichye back?" The concierge replied, "Back to the old lady, the prince came back on horseback. Only the prince's attendant Qin Zhen followed, and the eldest lady did not follow him." Mrs. Yang sarcastically said, "It's rare for the worthless yet to be valuable once. I want to see how long she can be arrogant this time. It's best to keep being valuable and don't let me look down on her." Second Grandma Li looked at Mrs. Li without knowing why, and asked curiously, "Mom, what does Grandma mean by valuable? The eldest uncle is the eldest lady of Qingqiu Palace, why is it not valuable?" Li laughed and said, "Don't look at Mr. Ye, who always looks aloof and arrogant. That's because the prince is not around. As long as he is around, her eyes seem to be on him. Wherever the prince goes, her eyes will follow him. His eyes are so scorching that no one else can see him. Good riddance." Speaking of which, Mrs. Ye is also a lady, but she doesn't look like a lady. She is not reserved at all. It is unbearable to look at and looks worthless. Word spread that it was worthless. Second Grandma Li's eyes widened when she heard this, and she said, "Oh my God, this is too bold. Didn't Mrs. Jean teach her?" Mrs. Yang snorted coldly, "Teaching? This is a family tradition of Duke Qingqiu." Second Grandma Li seemed to have discovered a shocking secret, and asked with a gossipy face, "Family history? Is Mrs. Jean like this too?" Mrs. Yang laughed and said, "Back then, when Qin Yu saw Ye Yun like this, he wanted to stick to Ye Yun, and his actions were so bold that it was unimaginable. The elders of many families in the capital did not allow their daughters to play with Qin Yu. After Qin Yu married Ye Yun, she gave birth to 2 daughters, each of whom was exactly like her. The criminals chase a man, and they are fascinated by the virgin. The little one seduced the king of Qin, who is now the emperor." Second Grandma Yang's heart was beating loudly when she heard this, and her eyes were filled with envy. When Mrs. Yang saw it, she immediately lowered her face and said unhappily, "It's all in the past, why do you still mention it?" Mrs. Li seconded, "It's been a long time ago, so it's okay not to mention it." "Mother, if Mrs. Ye doesn't come back, what will happen to the woman brought back by the prince?" Mrs. Yang said, "Cool, this matter has nothing to do with us, so don't worry about it." Mrs. Li nodded and said, "My mother is right. My sister-in-law is the prince's wife and the prince's official wife. If the prince takes a concubine, the prince's wife should take care of it. If the prince's wife doesn't come back, this matter will naturally be delayed." Second Grandma Li said, "I heard that the woman is the daughter of the county magistrate." "You said she is the daughter of the county magistrate. Why would she be willing to be a concubine?" Mrs. Li snorted and said, "A daughter of a magistrate from a small border county can climb to the heights of the British prince's family, and she is not bad at being a concubine. This woman can climb into the prince's bed and give birth to a son and a daughter. It is not easy." When she entered the door, the main room was wonderful. Second Grandma Li said with a smile, "The eldest uncle has no children, and the reputation of the crown prince's wife may be lost sooner or later." Mrs. Li looked at Mrs. Yang, "Mother, if Mr. Ye doesn't come back, is she trying to intimidate Mr. Wang?" Mrs. Yang thought for a while and said, "It's possible." Second Grandma Li said, "If this is the case, should we help the Wang family? I really want to see the Wang family fight with the eldest uncle, a famous lady from the capital fighting with a talented girl from the border, or a head-on battle between a general's wife and his concubine. How interesting it would be. Mrs. Yang laughed and scolded, "You girl, I'm afraid the world will not be in chaos." Second Grandma Li said coquettishly, "Grandma, don't you expect it? If we fight, it will definitely be better than a drama." Mrs. Yang's interest was aroused, she nodded with a smile and said, "Expectation is expectation. Let's wait and see from the other side first, don't rush to the end." Mrs. Ler nodded and said, "Mother is right, let's watch first and don't end up. Ya had better hold on tight and don't let us down. Why, wouldn't it be more lively when the uncle comes back and comes face to face with Mrs. Wang?" Mrs. Ler said, "What's the excitement about? You are just watching the excitement. What good will it do to us if the two little ones are included in the ancestral genealogy? What if the Ye family has a fight with the Wang family and records the Wang family's son in her name? It's not good for us at all. You have to know that since the Ye family cannot have children, the prince will not have a legitimate son. Son, do you understand?" Second Grandma Li asked blankly, "What good can a legitimate son do?" Mrs. Yang replied, "In the British government, only the legitimate son can inherit the property. With Ye's character, it is very possible for him to do so." Mrs. Yang first replied to Mrs. Li's words, and then continued what Mrs. Li said. Mrs. Li said, "So, Ye's attitude is very important." Mrs. Yang nodded as she spoke, having an idea in her mind. Said, "Okay, let's talk about it here. Let's wait and see for a few days before making a decision. I'm tired and want to take a rest. You can step back." Mrs. Ler and Grandma Li stood up and said goodbye to Mrs. Yang. Mrs. Yang waited for Li's mother-in-law and daughter-in-law to retreat, and said to Grandma Wang, "This time, let's use Wang's help to get rid of Ye and those two children." Grandma Wang thought for a while and said, "The old lady has a good idea. This is indeed a good opportunity." Mrs. Yang said, "Watch it first, the days are long, there is no rush in this matter, wait until that Ye comes back, and then we will look for opportunities to take our time." Grandma Wang leaned forward and said, "Yes, I understand." Shuer came in and said, "Old madam, Mrs. Wang has taken the seventh master and the third miss to Wuliu Hall. You are in a panic, where did the seventh master come from, and where did the third young lady come from?" Grandma Wang looked at Mrs. Yang, whose face suddenly darkened, and turned around to scold her. Shuer glanced at Mrs. Yang and immediately lowered her head. "I'm sorry, I know I was wrong, please punish me, madam." Mrs. Yang asked with a straight face, "That woman went to Wuliu Hall?" Shuer leaned forward and said, "Yes, the person in charge of Du brought the food box to Wang's residence and handed the food box to Wang. Soon, Wang took the two children to Wuliu Hall." "Oh? What are you planning, old man?" Mrs. Yang straightened her back after listening to Shuer's report. "It's interesting. Let people keep an eye on the Wang family and Wu Lutang." Shuer stood and moved. Grandma Wang said, "Girl, didn't you hear the old lady's instructions?" Shuer hurriedly bowed and responded, "Yes, I understand." Shuer retreated. Mrs. Yang glanced at the door and said, "Shuer is young after all, and her work is unreliable. Go ahead and give them a few words to let them know what's going on." Grandma Wang bent her knees and said, "Okay, old slave, let's go now." At Wuliutang, Mrs. Wang, her son, and one daughter were carrying food boxes, but Qin Zhen stopped them at the entrance of the courtyard. Wang Shifushan said, "Deputy Envoy Qin, I will bring Zi Lanzixi to bring lunch to the Crown Prince. I also ask Deputy Envoy Qin to be accommodating." Qin Zhen said in embarrassment, "Aunt Wang, it's not that I'm unreasonable. The prince has ordered that no one be allowed in, and I can't help it." Wang held the food box and tiptoed to look into the yard. Her eyes were full of anxiety and she said, "It's already noon. The prince hasn't eaten yet. Even a tough man has to eat." Qin Zhen was also hungry, so he said, "Why don't you, Aunt Wang, please wait here while I go in and report the matter to see what the prince says." "What do you think?" Wang nodded and said, "Okay, thank you, Deputy Qin. Thank you for your work." Qin Zhen turned around and entered the courtyard, went straight to the study, and knocked on the door. A voice of reproach came from the room. "Didn't I tell you that I don't want anyone to disturb me?" Qin Zhen said, "Your Majesty, Aunt Wang has brought Mr. Lan and Miss Zixi to deliver lunch to the prince. Please come in and let me know." When Lu Dinkin heard that it was the Wang family who brought his children to bring him lunch, his anger dissipated a lot, and his voice lowered and he said, "Tell them that I am not hungry anymore and let them go back. When I finish my work these days, go see them again." Qin Zhen bowed his head and said, "Yes, I understand." Qin Zhen turned around and went out. He walked to the door of the courtyard and shook his head at Mrs. Wang and said, "The prince said he was not hungry and asked Aunt Wang to go back. The prince also said that he would come to see you after he has finished his work for the past few days." Zi-11 took the food box from Wang's hand and said to Qin Zhen, "Uncle Qin, my aunt and brother are waiting at the door. Can you let me bring the food in to my father?" Qin Zhen wanted to dissuade him. Lu Zixi spoke first, "Uncle Qin, I promise that I will only deliver the food to the door and never disturb Dad." "Uncle Qin, I beg you, okay." Qin Zhen couldn't resist Lu Zixi's coquettish behavior and nodded in agreement. "Okay, Uncle Qin will follow you." With that said, Qin Zhen took the food box from Lu Zixi's hand. "Let's go, I'll carry it." Qin Zhen took Lu Zixi into the courtyard and walked along the corridor. When he was approaching the study, Qin Zhen handed the food box to Zi-11 and said, "Miss Zixi, the prince is in that room. You go over there bar." Lu Zixi nodded and struggled to carry the food box to the room Qin Zhen pointed to. "Go to the door, put the food box on the ground, reach out and knock on the door." Lu Dinkin was about to get angry when he heard a soft voice coming in, "Dad, this is 11ER. 11ER has put the food at the door for Dad. Dad must remember to eat it. 11ER doesn't disturb Dad. Dad, 11ER is back." Lu Dinkin responded warmly, "Okay, thank you 11ER, Dad will eat it later." After receiving Lu Dinkin's answer, Lu Zixi happily waved her hands and left. After Lu Zixi left, Lu Dinkin put the objects spread out in front of him back into the box one by one, then closed the box, picked it up and put it in the secret compartment on the bookshelf. Subsequently, Lu Dinkin opened the door, carried the food box at the door into the room, sat down and started eating. Lu Zixi, who was hiding behind a willow tree far away, saw Lu Dinkin carrying the food box into the house and smiled at Qin Zhen, who was not far away. Qin Zhen smiled and gave her a thumbs up. The reason why Qin Zhen agreed to Lu Zixi's delivery of food boxes was because he knew that the twins had an extraordinary status in Lu Dinkin's heart, so he dared to let her in. LV Dinkin didn't have much fondness for Wang Shuang, but he really liked these two children. Wang Shuang's father, Wang Yushun, had mediocre qualifications and no connections in the officialdom. He served as county magistrate for 3 consecutive terms in Qi County and had no chance of promotion. Hence, he set his sights on Lu Dinkin and often invited Lu Dinkin to his house for drinks and meals. Once, Magistrate Wang tampered with Lu Dinkin's wine and sent him to his daughter's boudoir. After Lu Dinkin sobered up, he knew that he had fallen into Wang's Hixian's trap and was being plotted against, so naturally he was not happy. But thinking that he was just bringing a woman into the house, Lu Dinkin lost his temper and dismissed the matter without taking it to heart. Before the banquet was over, Wang Shuang was carried back in a small sedan chair. The next year, Wang Shuang gave birth to twins for him. Because these children were by his side and he watched them grow up, his affection for them was somewhat deeper than that of other children before him. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 309. Chapter 309 Bad Things. When Ludinkin learned that Luzikin was not born to Yeshan, he was even a little secretly happy. He thought about recording these children in Yeshan's name and giving them the status of legitimate sons and daughters. Ludinkin did not expect that Yeshan would react so strongly after knowing that he had taken a concubine, and she would actually want to divorce him. Thinking of this, Ludinkin put down the chopsticks in his hand, stood up and walked to the desk. Take out the pen, ink, paper, and inkstone and prepare to write and leave the book. Ludinkin stood in front of the writing desk for a long time, scrapping several pieces of paper while writing. On the other side, the British Duke learned that Wang had not entered Wuliu Hall and said, "It is also useless." The servant came in and reported, "My lord, Miss Zixi sent the food box to Wuliu Hall and came out laughing with Deputy Qin." The British Duke was stunned, waved his hand and said, "I understand, you can go down." After the servants retreated, the British Duke looked up at the sky outside the window and said to Du Ben, "These two children grew up beside Dinkin, and their importance in Dinkin's heart is not low." Du Ben leaned forward and said, "My lord, this is a good thing." The British Duke nodded, turned around and walked to the desk to sit down. "It is indeed a good thing. I will tell my servants to take care of Zi-11 and Zi-Lan." Du Ben leaned over and said, "Yes, I have written it down." "What about Mr. Wang?" The British Duke said, "She is just an ant, so just treat her according to the standards of an ant." Du Ben bowed and said, "Yes, I understand, little one." The British Duke thought for a while, and then explained, "Over Zilan Zixi, you send a few trustworthy people there, and be careful about Rong Hall." Du Ben knew the importance. "Yes, I will make arrangements later." The British Duke nodded, turned his head and looked out of his eyes, and said, "Dinkin's meal should be finished. Go and invite him over. I have something to say to him." Du Ben bowed down and left the study with his hands down. When Du Ben arrived at Wuliu Hall, Wang had already left with his two children, and only Qin Zhen was guarding the door. When Qin Zhen saw Du Ben coming, he bowed and said, "Guard Du is doing well." Du Ben said, "How come there is only one deputy envoy of Qin, and what about the others?" Qin Zhen said, "Lu Li, King Mo and the others have gone to do things for the prince and will not come back until later." Du Ben nodded and said, "So that's it? If we need help, Deputy Qin will come and look for me." Qin Zhen bowed and thanked him. "Okay, I'll thank Du for the job." Du Ben said, "Where is the prince?" "The Duke of the country has invited me." Qin Zhen rubbed his head with a sad look on his face, and finally said, "I'm going to report it right now." Du Ben leaned forward and said, "Thank you very much." "I've got to thank you, Deputy Envoy of Qin." Qin Zhen said a few polite words, turned around and went into the hospital to report. In the study, Ludinkin threw a paper all over the floor, holding a pen and not knowing how to write. Qin Zhen's voice sounded outside the door, "Your Majesty, Steward Du from the Duke's side came over to report that the Duke has invited me." Ludinkin let out a long sigh, thinking that he had to report the matter to the British government, so he put the pen on the pen holder and said, "I understand." After hearing Ludinkin's answer, Qin Zhen knew that Ludinkin's mood had calmed down, so he breathed a sigh of relief and stood at the door waiting. Ludinkin came out of the study and said to Qin Zhen, "Don't let anyone enter the study. There are only two of them in Wuli Utang right now. If they are not allowed to enter the house, doesn't that mean that he is not allowed to enter the house?" Qin Zhen bowed his head and responded, "Yes, I understand." Ludinkin went to Wen Yuan Pavilion. Seeing Ludinkin enter the room, the British public pointed to the chair opposite and said, "Sit down." LV Dinkin bowed his hands and walked to the opposite side to sit down. Dubin served the tea, consciously retreated, and closed the door behind him. The British gentleman picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, and asked, "Is Mr. Yes' injury still not fully healed?" Lu Dinkin was stunned and asked, "Sister Shan is injured?" Lu Dinkin's rhetorical question made the British Duke stunned, and asked, "Didn't you go to the Chinquo Duke's mansion to pick up someone? Didn't you see anyone?" LV Dinkin nodded truthfully and said, "Sister Shan doesn't see me." The British Duke sighed lightly. Yes, Shan's temper has become more and more stubborn in recent years. She has fallen out with each other. Compared with the previous years, she is completely different. Lu Dinkin's attention was on Yes Shan's injury and asked, "How did Sister Shan get injured? Where was it injured?" The British Duke was a little annoyed that he was too quick to talk. Now when his son asked, he had to answer truthfully. A few days ago, Sister Shan had an argument with Mr. Li in the garden, and they got involved. When Sister Shan fell to the ground, she hit a rock and broke the skin on her forehead, causing some blood. Lu Dinkin frowned and said, "The Dingning family should treat Sister Shan as a sister-in-law, and her eldest sister-in-law is like a mother. How dare she attack Sister Shan? Where is our tutor? This is the following crime. How did my father deal with this matter?" Of. The British Duke looked at his agitated son and said, "I have punished Mr. Li with a grounding." Lu Dinkin became angry and asked, "A ground ban? Li, she has no respect for her elders, and her father is just a ground ban." "That's right. With my mother protecting me, I'm afraid the grounding is just a show." In these years when her son was not at home, Sister Shan had not suffered less from her mother, right? It's no wonder that Sister Shan feels cold towards this family. The British father-in-law was scolded by his son, and he looked a little embarrassed and said, "Are you trying to get into trouble with me? What kind of back house doesn't have some troubles? Are you yelling at me about this?" LV Dinkin clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and asked expressionlessly, "Why is father looking for me here? Please tell me." The British Duke sighed and slowed down his voice, "I came here to ask you how to arrange the arrangements for Mrs. Wang and the two children. Before you brought Mrs. Ye back, and without Mrs. Yes nodding, the concubine of the Wang family identity of." The British Duke's last words were not spoken. Lu Dinkin said dejectedly, "Sister Shan will not come back." The British Duke looked at Lu Dinkin blankly and said, "What do you mean? Dinkin, what do you mean if Ye doesn't come back? Please explain yourself clearly." Lu Dinkin raised his head and looked at the British Duke, and said after a while, "Sister Shan, she doesn't want to see me again, and she doesn't want to go back to the British Duke's residence. She proposed to make peace with me. Are you satisfied with forcing Sister Shan away? Sister Shan is not coming back. She should be happy because her mother's wish was fulfilled. Dad is happy too, right?" The British father-in-law was stunned on the spot. He never dreamed that Yes Shan would propose a divorce. How could she dare to live in a woman's house? The British Duke asked, "Do you agree?" Lu Dinkin asked, "Sister Shan asked Zikin to tell me, can I disagree?" The British father blurted out, "Ms. Ye is your daughter-in-law. Who can do anything to you if you don't agree?" Lu Dinkin sneered, "Ziqin has been with his father for so many years, but his father still doesn't understand his temperament. What Ziqin wants to do you think he can't do it if I don't agree with him?" The British Duke replied, "If you don't agree to peace, what can Zikin do to you?" Lu Dinkin said, "Yes, as long as I don't let go, Zikin can't do anything to me. If his mother poisoned Zikin and Zikin didn't have the means to assassinate Zikin, I would do whatever I want. However, Zikin had a lot of evidence. If Zikin was only the sixth son of the British government, it would not be a big deal if he had evidence. But now he is the eldest son of the emperor, the only eldest son of the emperor. Any of the stupid things his mother has done can put the British government in ruins. The British Duke was speechless for a moment after hearing what Ludinkin said. He forgot about this incident. Zikin was already the king of Qin, but in his heart, Zikin was still the gentle, thrifty, and polite grandson. The British Duke said, "Ye has been his mother for many years, and you have been his father for many years." Ludinkin sighed, "My father has been his grandfather for many years, and he still doesn't understand his temperament. His kindness is only given to the people he cares about, and Sister Shan is the person he cares about. Whoever treats Sister Shan well, he should be polite to everyone, and on the contrary." The British Duke asked, "What happens on the contrary?" Ludinkin said, "Zikin will not be recognized by his relatives even if he is cruel." "How do you know?" "Dinkin, do you know anything?" the British Duke asked. Ludinkin did not say anything further, only said, "Don't provoke Zikin's bottom line. He is no longer the child who was manipulated by others. He is now a high-ranking prince with brains, means and power." After hearing Ludinkin's words, the British Duke fell silent. After a long time, the British Duke asked, "Dinkin, this marriage is really irreversible? You can talk to Ya again and let her take back her intention to divorce." Ludinkin shook his head, "Sister Shan doesn't want to see me, how can I talk to her?" The British Duke said, "You have been married for many years, and you both say that one day is a blessing for 100 days. If you go and beg her a few more times, maybe she will soften her heart." Ludinkin noticed that the British Duke was unusual, and looked up at the British Duke steadily, which made the British Duke feel a little uncomfortable. The British Duke asked, "Why are you looking at me like this?" Ludinkin asked, "Why doesn't father let me make peace with Sister Shan? Don't say anything to me about whether to persuade us to get together or not to break up." The British Duke said, "In the current situation, it is not appropriate for us to cut off the relationship with Duke Chinquo's government. This will be detrimental to the prince." Lv Dinkin looked at the British father like a stranger. In his father's eyes, he only saw interests. "Father, what I just said is very clear. Now, it's not me who wants to divorce, it's Sister Shan who doesn't see me, it's her who is determined to divorce. I can't even see her face, how can I talk to her? Say." The British Duke thought for a while and said, "I'm going to the Duke Chinquo's mansion, and I'm going to ask for help from the Ye family." Ludinkin did not dissuade him and said, "Since father wants to go, let's go. My son has other things to do, so he should go and get busy first." The British Duke watched Ludinkin leave and was so angry that he couldn't say a word. Ludinkin came out of the study, looked up at the sky, and let out a long breath. He had only been back for half a day, and he was already overwhelmed by a lot of troubles. No wonder Ye Shan wanted to escape from this home. Ludinkin walked out of the courtyard gate, and walked along the corridor to the backyard. He wanted to see the two children. Walking to Giwan, I met Lu Dingning walking towards him, waving a folding fan. When Lu Dingning saw Ludinkin, he put away the folding fan with a smile, bowed and said, "Brother is back." Lv Dinkin looked up at the grey sky and asked, "Is it hot in Dingning?" Lu Dingning's expression was stagnant for a moment, but then he understood what Ludinkin meant, and he shook his folding fan open with a smile. "Brother, are you talking about the folding fan? My brother has not been back to Beijing for many years and is not familiar with the fashionable clothes in Beijing. Let me tell you, it is fashionable for men nowadays to hold folding fans. There are many kinds of folding fans, which can be used when opened and hidden when closed. They can move forward and retreat freely and carefree. This is called elegance. The talents of the literati are all in the folding fan. Brother, don't underestimate this folding fan of mine. It was made by a famous artist and I spent a lot of effort to get it." Ludinkin looked at it intently and said with disgust, "You have to rack your brains to write a couplet, and you still talk about elegance. You are not afraid of people laughing at you." Facing Ludinkin's ridicule, Lu Dingning was not angry. He laughed twice and said, "Whatever I do cannot escape my brother's eyes. Does my brother come from my father?" Lu Dinkin didn't want to talk nonsense with Lu Dingning and said, "Are you here to find your father? Go quickly, it's too late and my father will go out. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first." When Lu Dinkin stepped forward, Lu Ningning spoke first and said, "I'm not here to find my father, I'm here to find my brother." LV Dinkin stopped, turned around and asked, "Looking for me? What's the matter?" Lu Dingning nodded, "Yes, something happened. Brother, let's find a place to talk, sit down and talk slowly, how about going to my yard?" Lu Dinkin shook his head, "No need, if you have anything to say, just say it here." Lu Dingning looked around, pointed to a bench not far away on the corridor and said, "How about we sit there?" LV Dinkin looked at the bench and had no objection. Lu Dingning's face showed joy, and he walked to the bench first, asking for warmth as he walked. When he got to the bench, he bent down and flicked the dust on the bench with his long sleeves, and said with great respect, "Brother, please sit down." Lu Dinkin glanced at Lu Dingning and saw a flattering look on his face. He sat down on the chair and asked, "Tell me, what's the matter?" Lu Dingning chuckled twice, sat down next to Lu Dinkin, and said, "Brother hasn't returned to Beijing for many years. I've been looking around, and finally I hope that my brother will come back." Lu Dinkin looked sideways at Lu Dingning and interrupted him, "Okay, just say these words once. If you say it too much, it will be too false." Lu Dingning raised his folding fan and swore to the sky, "Brother, you have wronged me. I sincerely look forward to your return to Beijing, and my neck has grown long in anticipation." Lu Dingning touched his neck with his hand as he spoke. Lu Dinkin couldn't stand it any longer and said, "Given the friendship we have grown up fighting each other, you can't hope for my return. It's true this time. Ever since I knew you were going back to Beijing to report on your work, I've been looking forward to your return." Lu Dinkin said, "Okay, thank you very much. Tell me if you need my help." Lu Dingning smiled apologetically and said, "Brother is my brother. We grew up together and understand me best. Stop talking nonsense, tell me, what do you want me to do?" Lu Dingning raised his hand and touched his head and said, "What, brother has also seen it? I am really wasting my time doing nothing now. At any rate, I had been a minister of the Ministry of War for many years, and I was quite capable. When brother comes back, he will definitely meet with the King of Qin, Zikin, right?" The Prince of Qin's mansion was a newly opened residence, and it was just the time to hire people. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 310. Chapter 310 End of Destiny. As he spoke, Lu Dingning looked at Lu Dinkin's face. Seeing that there was no anger on his face, he boldly continued, "Brother, what about that? See if you can help me mention it in front of Zi Qin, so that I can hide it in Prince Qin's mansion. If you can't hold a position like a long history, then a staff member can." Lu Dinkin replied, "Why am I the one to tell you? It's not like you don't know Zikin. You are Zikin's second uncle. If you open the door, can Zikin not give you the face?" Lu Dingning smiled awkwardly and said, "It's always bad to talk about this kind of thing yourself. It would be better if someone else relays it." Lu Dinkin asked, "Have you never mentioned it to King Qin?" Lu Dingning shook his head and said, "It's not like I haven't mentioned it before. The day before yesterday, I had a banquet at the King of Qin's palace. I hinted it to the King of Qin. Because the occasion was wrong, I didn't say it clearly." Lu Dinkin asked, "Why should you go to Prince Qin's mansion? Wouldn't it be more appropriate for you to go to Prince Xian's mansion? You are King Xian's uncle. If you want to find something to do, can King Xian take care of you?" Lu Dingning patted the folding fan and said with some embarrassment, "What about that? It's because there are no suitable positions in Prince Yen's mansion right now and it's hard to make arrangements. No position? What does it matter if there are one or two more staff in a royal palace? Isn't it because the wise king doesn't want you to go there? Being pointed out by Lu Dinkin, Lu Dingning felt a little unable to step down. No, it's because of my relationship with Prince Yen's uncle. I don't think it's good to go to Prince Yen's house to do things, so I want to avoid suspicion. Lu Dinkin asked, the Prince of Qin's mansion doesn't want to avoid suspicion? Also, have you discussed this idea with your father? Does your father agree with what you do? What's the objection? I'm looking for a job based on my ability. What can my father say? Lu Dingning opened and closed the folding fan in his hand as he spoke. Lu Dinkin was dazzled by what he saw. He reached out and grabbed the folding fan from his hand, closed it and put it aside. Said, when you speak, pay attention. Lu Dingning looked at the folding fan on the bench and said nothing. He clasped his hands in front of him and asked, brother, what do you think? You can help me tell Zikin and ask me to go to the Prince of Qin's mansion to get a job. Okay. I really don't want to live idle every day. It's very uncomfortable to go out and be looked down upon by others. Lu Dinkin said, I can't help you with this matter. First of all, you have to ask for your father's approval for this matter. You also said that you have been the minister of the Ministry of War for several years, and you should have some things figured out. Secondly, I don't have that face in front of King Qin. LV Dingning became anxious when he saw that Lu Dinkin rejected him. Brother, you really don't need to talk to your father about this matter. Furthermore, Zikin was once your son. As an old man, how could he not give you face when you ask? Seeing that Lu Dingning's mui couldn't make sense, Lu Dinkin didn't want to continue with him. He stood up and said, I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. You go to discuss this matter with your father first. Your father has agreed for you to go to Prince Qin's mansion to do something. You can come back to find out later. Lu Dingning stood up and asked, seriously? As long as my father nods, will you tell Zikin for me? Lu Dinkin nodded, yes, as long as father agrees, I will tell Zikin. Of course, I don't know whether Zikin needs you or not. Lu Dingning happily responded, okay, thank you brother. I'll go find my father right away. LV Dinkin ignored him and walked away. On the other side, Yamingkin stood at the gate of Duke Chinquo's mansion. When he saw the British Duke getting off the carriage, he immediately went up to greet him, bowed his hands and said, hello, Lord Duke. The British Duke looked at Yamingkin and asked, where are your adults? Not at home. Yamingkin leaned forward and said, Master, my aunt is in a bad mood when I return home. My grandmother and mother accompanied my aunt to go out to relax. My father has not yet gone to office, and my brother is currently working in the Prince of Qin's mansion, and he is in the Prince of Qin's mansion during the day. The British Duke was stunned for a moment, looked at Yamingkin carefully, then looked up at the door of Duke Chinquo's mansion, and asked, where did your grandmother and the others accompany your aunt to relax? Yamingkin shook his head and said, my lord, I'm sorry, I don't know. When my mother left, she said that there must be a lot of people looking for my aunt in the past 2 days. If she told her where she was, she would definitely not be in peace, so she told no one. He only said that they would go away for a few days and come back a few days later. Therefore, I don't know where they went. After hearing this, the British public's face turned blue and white for a while. Yamingkin leaned forward and said, my lord, please come in and have a cup of tea. In a while, my father will be leaving for office. The British Duke waved his hand and said, no, I still have something to do. I'll come back another day. Yamingkin made a sound, bowed his hands and said, Master, please go slowly. The British public servant got into the car and Du Ben drove away. The British Duke asked, do you think Mr. Ye really went out? Du Bin shook his head and said, I don't know. In Du Bin's opinion, it was probably because the eldest lady didn't want to see anyone, and Duke Chinquo's suggestion to stay away was just rhetoric. With the Duke's shrewdness, it is impossible for him not to know. The British Duke sighed and said, she has endured it for so many years, why is she still trying to reconcile now? Du Bin did not answer. In the past, the eldest lady had a sixth master. For the sake of the sixth master, the eldest lady had to endure everything. Now, the eldest lady is alone in the house, without worries, and has a harmonious relationship with her natal family, and she has the King of Qin as her backer. What else do you need to endure? The British father leaned against the carriage and said nothing. After driving for a while, the British Duke said, go to Prince Yen's mansion. Du Bin agreed, turned his horse's head and headed towards Prince Yen's mansion. When the British Duke's entourage arrived at Prince Yen's mansion in advance to report the matter, Prince Yen was planning to go to the Duke's mansion. When he heard that Duke British was coming through the mansion, Prince Yen simply waited for Duke British at the door. The British Duke got off the carriage and saw the wise king standing at the door. He couldn't help but be startled and asked, Your Majesty, are you going out? The wise king said, I was originally going to the British Duke's residence, but I didn't expect the Duke to come over. What happened? The British Duke let out a long sigh, raised his hand and pointed inside. The wise king understood and politely allowed the British Duke to go to the palace, and the two of them went to the study. The British Duke sighed and said, Yes, Mr. Ye wants to make peace with Dinkin. I wanted to go to Chinquo Duke's mansion to persuade Mr. Ye, but I didn't know that Ms. Ye avoided seeing me. The wise king looked at the British Duke in disbelief. Auntie wants to reconcile with uncle. The British Duke nodded, yes, I don't know what Mr. Ye thinks. The Xian Wang held his chin with his hand and thought deeply. After a long time, he said, it is not a bad thing for us that my aunt and uncle have reconciled. The British Duke raised his head and looked at the wise king and said, at this time, if Ding Kunruo and the Ye family are reconciled, in the eyes of outsiders, the prince and the king of Qin have broken up, which is very detrimental to the prince. The wise king said, but in this way, my uncle's heart will not be biased towards King Qin, but will return to our side. The British Duke shook his head and said, not necessarily. If the Ye family and the king of Qin make trouble in front of Dinkin, not only will Dinkin not be biased towards the prince, he is afraid that he will hate the Yang family and vent his anger on the prince. The wise king frowned, looked at the British Duke and asked, spreading trouble? What is right and wrong? The British Duke said, the things Yang did before were not worthy of publicity. The wise king thought of his grandmother who was holding her back and asked, does my uncle know what my grandmother did? The British Duke nodded, you should already know from the tone of Dinkin's words. The wise king thought for a moment and said, I heard that my uncle has brought back his concubine and a son and a daughter. Yes, Wang is the daughter of Wang Yushun, the magistrate of Qixian County. Zilan and Zixi are twins. The wise king asked, how does my uncle treat the Wang family? They have just returned to the house today, and they still can't tell whether the relationship between Dinkin and the Wang family is deep. Dinkin is really concerned about the children. With that said, the British Duke told Lu Zixi about delivering food to Lu Dinkin. In the past, if Dinkin was unhappy, only the Ye family could enter his yard, and no one else could enter. Not even Zikin. Zixi could bring food in, which shows that Zixi was in Dinkin's heart. Portion size. The wise king said, as long as my uncle has someone he cares about, we are not afraid that he will not listen to us. The British Duke nodded, this old man has also thought of it and has already ordered Du Bin to send someone to Zi11 Zi land to serve them. The wise king said, the Duke is thoughtful. However, just taking care of the Wang family and their children is not enough. We need to think about two more steps. If the uncle and the Ye family reconcile, the position of the British Crown Prince's wife will be vacant. Should the uncle support the Wang family or marry another person? Has the Duke asked his uncle? The British Duke's eyes lit up. The prince is still thinking too far. I only think about the things at hand and have forgotten about it. The Wang family does not have enough status to be the wife of the crown prince of the British Duke. Dinkin had to marry someone else. The wise king was satisfied with the British Duke's answer and said, "My mother-in-law is relatively familiar with the ladies from the aristocratic families in the capital. If my uncle marries another man, he must ask his mother and concubine to help him look after her. It's just that the Duke of the State must comfort my grandmother and not let her cause trouble again." At the mention of Yang's name, the British man felt a headache and pressed his temples. Seeing the British Duke's sad expression, the wise king asked, "Grandpa is very worried." The British Duke said helplessly, "Your Majesty knows that Yang's temperament is too stubborn." The wise king looked at the British Duke with a hint of evil in his eyes. "Grandpa, Grandma is not in good health, so don't let her worry about the affairs of the house anymore. Grandma has worried about the house all her life, so she should be allowed to take good care of herself in her old age." "That's it?" the British Duke said in embarrassment, "but Mr. Yang is not willing to live in Zhuangzi." The wise king said, "My lord, you are the head of the family in the British government. Shouldn't you have the final say in the affairs of the government?" The British public was undecided. The wise king continued, "My grandfather often reminds me that we must be decisive in doing things." The British Duke nodded and said, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, I will handle this matter." The wise king stood up and said, "I will not go to the house today. I, the king, will go to the palace first to talk to my mother and concubine about my uncle, so that my mother and concubine can get started first. If my uncle gets divorced, he will try to remarry the crown prince's wife into the palace before the end of the year." The British Duke then stood up and said, "Well, thank you, Your Majesty. I'm going back to my house first." The wise king nodded, "Let's go, I will see the Duke off." The next day, after the morning court, the king of Qin caught up with Zhang Qingyun, the minister of punishment. Zhang Shangshu bowed his hands and said, "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" King Qin bowed his hands and returned the courtesy and said, "Mr. Zhang has made a serious statement. I am now the consul of the Ministry of Punishment and must abide by the rules of the Ministry of Punishment. I came to see Mr. Zhang because I want to ask Mr. Zhang for a leave of absence." Zhang Shangshu smiled and said, "The Emperor has told me that while the prince is in the Ministry of Punishment, I will cooperate with the prince. Therefore, if the prince has something to do, just go and do it. There is no need to ask for leave." The minister of the Qin dynasty, Zhang Shangshu, cupped his hand and said, "I understand. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang. I would like to take a step in advance." King Qin left the palace gate, got on the carriage and said to Rugjuan, "Let's go to Jingzhou Mansion." Rugjuan drove to Jingzhou Mansion. On the way, Rugjuan asked, "Sir, do you think the prince will go to the Yamen today?" King Qin said firmly, "He will go." Rugjuan felt a little happy in his heart. If Madam can reconcile smoothly and get out of the quagmire of the British government, it would be worth celebrating today. King Qin also felt a bit of anticipation in his heart and said, "You will go to Chang'an restaurant later and ask shopkeeper Miao to prepare 10 tables and send them to Duke Qingqiu's mansion. Let's have a good celebration today. By the way, let someone inform Xiao and ask her to come to Qingqiu Duke's mansion and let's have a good time together." Rugjuan nodded in agreement, "Okay, I understand." King Qin rushed to Jingzhou Mansion and got out of the car just in time to see Lu Dinkin dismounting. Lu Dinkin handed the reins to the young man and walked towards King Qin. After seeing the courtesy, he asked, "Your Majesty, is there really no room for redemption?" Lu Dinkin of the Qin dynasty shook his head and said, "My aunt has made up her mind, and she hopes that the prince will fulfill her wish." Lu Dinkin raised his hand slightly and said, "Your Majesty, please." The king of Qin nodded, "Okay, Your Majesty, please. Lu Dinkin stood where he was, turning around and looking around, hoping that a familiar figure would appear. Your Majesty, please. King Qin saw that Lu Dinkin had not moved, so he turned around and urged. Lu Dinkin turned around and said, Your Majesty, can you wait a little longer? Wait another quarter of an hour. King Qin didn't know why Lu Dinkin had to wait for a quarter of an hour, but he still nodded and said, Okay. I'll go in first and wait for the prince inside. LV Dinkin leaned forward and said, Thank you very much, Your Majesty. King Qin glanced at Rugjuan, who nodded slightly. King Qin turned around and walked into the yamen. Lu Dinkin waited for a moment at the entrance of Jingzhou Mansion, and Qing Mo hurried over. Your Majesty, Qing Mo is here, Qin Zhen said. Lu Dinkin's eyes lit up and he quickly turned around to look over. When he saw that the only person coming was Qing Mo, the light in his eyes suddenly dimmed. Qing Mo stepped forward and shook his head at Lu Dinkin. Your Majesty, the people from Duke Qingqiu's mansion said that my wife is not in the mansion. Not in the house. Where have you been, do you know? Qing Mo nodded and said, I don't know, the people in Qingqiu Palace won't tell me. Lu Dinkin sighed and walked towards the yamen. A quarter of an hour later, King Qin came out of the yamen first, followed by Lu Dinkin, who looked lost. When Rugjuan saw King Qin coming out, he immediately drove his chariot over. The king of Qin turned around and cupped his hands towards Lu Dinkin and said, Goodbye, Your Majesty the Prince. LV Dinkin cupped his hands and said, Goodbye. King Qin turned around and got into the car, and ordered the guards, Go to the British Duke's mansion to inform Rumo, tell him that my aunt and the Crown Prince have reconciled, and ask him to take people to carry my aunt's things back to the Qingqiu Duke's mansion. End of this chapter.